A crackling fire illuminated the darkness of an ancient night, casting its wild dance of light and shadow on cave walls. Millennia ago, long before written words wove tales of heroes and monsters, humanity sat huddled around flames, their breath visible in the cold air. The fire was more than warmth, it was survival, a protector against the lurking predators of the unknown. In the flicker of those flames, in the shadows that leapt and twisted, something took shape. Something vast. Something terrifying. Something alive. The first dragons weren't born from flesh or bone, they were born from fear and fascination. Fire had a mind of its own, it could nurture life one moment and erase it the next. It wasn't hard to imagine a creature that could wield such power at will, a being with a belly of molten heat and breath that turned forests into ash. Fire was unpredictable, uncontrollable, and to ancient people, it was alive. The idea of a creature embodying this elemental force didn't just spark imaginations, it seared itself into the collective soul. Long before myths were carved into stone, the stars above offered their silent, mysterious stories. The ancient people gazed up at the heavens and saw more than just light, they saw motion, war, creation. Bright trails streaking across the sky became the fiery tails of celestial beasts. The occasional eruption of a volcano, spewing rivers of molten rock, seemed like the earth itself releasing one of these beings into the world. Dragons were written in the sky, in the earth, and in the fire. In the stillness of the night, there was the faint roar of the wind sweeping through the trees, a sound like something immense exhaling. Thunder rolled across mountains, echoing in deep, guttural tones that seemed too alive to belong to the sky alone. To the people who huddled under the vast canopy of stars, these sounds weren't just nature, they were the voices of something far greater, something ancient. The earth trembled, and their hearts pounded in awe. Creation stories from many lands begin with chaos, a primal nothingness where the forces of destruction and creation waged an eternal battle. Out of this chaos, dragons often emerged. They weren't merely beasts, but symbols of power, embodiments of creation itself. In some myths, they stirred the oceans to shape continents, carved valleys with their claws, and spat flames to form the sun. They were both the artists of the world and its potential destroyers. In the lands where the sun blazed mercilessly, dragons were born of the burning horizon. They stretched across the sky, their fiery scales shimmering as they consumed everything in their path. These creatures didn't simply threaten the land, they were the land, a physical manifestation of the unrelenting heat that turned soil to dust and rivers to steam. To the people who fought to survive in such places, dragons weren't imaginary. They were a reflection of their daily struggles, the embodiment of the merciless sun they worshipped and feared. Elsewhere, where the earth rumbled and fire erupted from its heart, dragons took the form of serpents coiled in volcanic caves. These were creatures of molten rock and smoke, their glowing eyes the embers of the earth's core. When they stirred, mountains shook, and rivers of fire swallowed villages whole. These dragons didn't need wings, they slithered through the earth, an ever-present reminder that the ground beneath human feet was as dangerous as the skies above. The people of the forests told stories of serpents that could summon storms with a flap of their mighty wings, their breaths igniting the treetops. Lightning wasn't just a random flash of light, but the fury of these creatures as they clashed in the heavens. Their roar split the sky open, sending torrents of rain that drowned the land. Fire and water, destruction and renewal, it was all part of their nature. In each corner of the world, dragons were tied to the raw, untamed forces of the universe. Fire wasn't the only element they commanded, but it was the one that burned brightest in the human heart. Fire meant survival, but it also meant loss. The village storyteller, whose words painted pictures brighter than the flames, might speak of how a dragon had created the first spark by stealing fire from the gods. Others whispered of how that same dragon, overcome by greed, had tried to hoard its flames, plunging the world into cold and darkness until it was defeated. The tales weren't always warnings, though. Sometimes, the dragons were allies. They carried the sun across the sky, lighting the world each day. They fought chaos, keeping the darkness at bay. They were both destroyers and saviors, feared and revered. To the ancient people, this duality wasn't a contradiction, it was truth. Fire, like life, was fragile and fierce, warm and wild. And so were dragons. Imagine a mother and her child sitting near the fire. The mother's voice rises and falls as she tells the child of a great dragon that once roamed the skies, its scales glinting like polished bronze. It was the first creature to see the dawn of the world, its breath giving life to the stars themselves. The child listens, wide-eyed, clutching a small wooden carving of a dragon. For them, it's not just a story, it's a connection to something eternal, a glimpse of a world both terrifying and wonderful. In every flame that flickered, and every ember that drifted upward to vanish into the darkness, there was the spirit of a dragon. It wasn't just a creature to these people, it was fire given form, chaos made flesh, the very breath of the gods brought to life. And as long as the flames burned, the dragons were never far away. The world was once a place of shadows and whispers. In the damp, dark forests where the trees stretched endlessly into the sky, the ground felt alive underfoot. Streams twisted like veins, and caves yawned wide, their mouths exhaling a cold, earthy breath. Beneath it all, there was movement. Unseen, but felt. A slither in the soil. A scrape against stone. To the early people of the world, these sounds weren't just the stirrings of nature. They were warnings. Before dragons had wings, before their breath turned to fire, there were serpents, endless, coiling, and ancient. They ruled the underworld of the earth, unseen but all-powerful. The ground was their domain, their bodies stretching for miles, wrapping around the roots of mountains. They weren't predators of flesh but of the soul, pulling people into the depths where the light could not follow. The serpent was not just an animal, it was a force. Silent, patient, always watching. Its body was a perfect predator's weapon, unbroken and infinite, able to slip into spaces no one could follow. The way it moved, smooth, deliberate, with a quiet power, carried a kind of dark magic. It was the stuff of nightmares, not because it was loud or violent, but because it was inevitable. In the cradle of human fears, serpents took their place early. Their patterns curled into stories, their scales reflecting the first glimmers of myths. To see one in the wild was a reminder of how small and vulnerable humanity was. The way a serpent could stare, unmoving, its unblinking eyes like twin shards of the void, it was as though it could see right into your heart. The oldest myths whispered of these creatures as creators and destroyers. In the depths of Africa's earliest tales, they were the rivers, vast and winding, carving life into the earth, but just as easily swallowing it in floods. In Australia, they were the rainbow serpent, breathing color and form into the land, but capable of devouring it all in anger. They were the Ouroboros in ancient Egypt, encircling the world with their endless form, both protector and prison. The fears weren't just in the mind, they were etched into the earth itself. Fossils, long before they were understood, became bones of monsters. When early humans stumbled upon massive, spiraling skeletons, they knew in their hearts that these weren't ordinary creatures. They were too big, too strange, too full of secrets. They were remnants of something powerful, something alive, if only in the stories passed down from trembling lips. Some myths said the great serpents carried the world on their backs. When the ground shook and the mountains roared, it wasn't nature, it was the serpent shifting, restless in its slumber. When rivers overflowed or dried up, it was because the serpent had taken its fill or retreated in anger. There was no escaping them. Even in death, their coiled forms seemed ready to spring back to life. But these creatures weren't just feared, they were worshipped. In their sinuous forms, ancient people saw eternity. A serpent that could shed its skin and emerge renewed was not just an animal, it was a symbol of rebirth, of life's endless cycle. To the minds of those early days, this ability made serpents both godlike and terrifying. They could bring life as easily as they could take it. In the labyrinthine caves of what is now Europe, ancient hands carved images into stone. Spirals, waves, endless loops, patterns that mirrored the coiling bodies of serpents. These carvings weren't decorations. They were talismans, warnings, prayers. They spoke of something the people couldn't escape, the presence of serpents in the world around them, and perhaps within themselves. The stories grew, and the serpents began to shift. They became bigger, more powerful. In Norse myths, Jormungandr, the world serpent, lay coiled in the ocean, so vast that it could encircle the entire earth and bite its own tail. When it moved, tsunamis followed. It wasn't just a creature, it was a force of nature, unstoppable, eternal. In Mesopotamian legends, Tiamat was a serpent of chaos, a primordial being who gave birth to the gods and then waged war against them. Her body, once slain, was split into the heavens and the earth, her essence forever woven into the fabric of existence. She wasn't evil, she was power itself, raw and untamed. Even the Bible wasn't free from serpents. In the garden, it was a serpent who whispered temptation, its voice soft and insidious. It wasn't strength or size that made it dangerous, but its cunning. It didn't need wings or flames, its power lay in its ability to plant doubt, to twist the truth, to slip into the cracks of the human soul. And as time passed, these serpents began to change. They grew limbs, wings, fire. They rose from the earth into the skies, becoming dragons. But even as they transformed, the serpentine essence never left. Their coils, their cunning, their connection to the primal fears of humanity, they carried it all. Beneath the scales of every dragon is the echo of those first serpents, sliding silently through the grass, through the rivers, through the ancient bones of the earth. They are still there, coiled tightly in the stories we tell, waiting to strike, waiting to remind us that some fears never die. The clash of steel against scales reverberated through the air. A knight, battered and weary, raised his sword to face the beast towering before him. Its wings spread wide, casting a shadow that swallowed the battlefield. The creature snarled, a guttural sound that sent shivers down every spine within earshot. But as the knight steadied his breath, he realized this wasn't the dragon he had prepared to face. Its movements were sharper, more agile, its limbs fewer. What stood before him wasn't the sprawling terror of his legends, but something smaller, faster, deadlier. This was a wyvern. Not all dragons are born the same. Their shapes shift, their powers differ, their presence changes with the land that birthed them. Some crawl. Some fly. Some coil endlessly through the depths of the earth. To the people who whispered stories about these beings, every detail mattered. Each culture sculpted their beasts differently, giving life to creatures that reflected their fears, their hopes, their gods. Wyverns were the swift predators of the skies. Sleek, fierce, and unforgiving, they were the hunters no one could outrun. Their wings weren't just for soaring, they were weapons in their own right, slicing through the air as they dove at unimaginable speeds. Unlike the sprawling, four-limbed dragons of grandeur, wyverns had only two hind legs. Their forelimbs had become part of their wings, creating a silhouette that seemed more like a nightmare born of wind and shadow. In the myths of medieval Europe, wyverns were often seen as symbols of plague and decay. They came not with fire, but with death that seeped into the land like poison. Rivers dried, crops withered, and the people believed it was the wyvern's venom that tainted everything it touched. Their stories painted wyverns as relentless destroyers, creatures that didn't hoard gold but instead left ruin in their wake. Dragons, by contrast, were creatures of immense power and regality. They weren't just predators, they were rulers. Their four mighty limbs carried them across kingdoms, while their wings stretched wide enough to blot out the sun. Where wyverns were lean and brutal, dragons were grand and unstoppable. They didn't just exist, they commanded. When a dragon's roar echoed across the mountains, entire armies faltered, their courage melting like snow under its fiery breath. Dragons carried treasures as ancient as the earth itself, gold that gleamed with the light of 1,000 sunsets, jewels that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the world. In tales across Europe and Asia, dragons were guardians of the unattainable, creatures that tested the worth of those who dared to stand before them. They weren't mindless beasts. They were intelligent, cunning, and often bound to the fates of kings and empires. And then there were the Wyrms. They didn't fly. They didn't stride. They crawled. Wyrms were the creeping terrors, the silent watchers of the underground. Their long, serpent-like bodies moved with a sinister grace, coiling and uncoiling through the cracks of the earth. They had no wings to lift them, no limbs to carry them, but their power was in their endurance, their sheer size. Where they slithered, the ground itself seemed to shudder in fear. In Norse legends, Wyrms were tied to the end of the world. Nidhogg, the great Wyrm of Yggdrasil, gnawed at the roots of the world tree, threatening to bring everything crashing down. To the Norse, Wyrms weren't just monsters, they were the embodiment of decay, the ever-present reminder that even the strongest foundations could erode under time's relentless bite. The cultural lines were never clean. In some tales, wyverns were mistaken for dragons, and Wyrms blurred into serpents. But the people who told these stories knew their distinctions. A dragon's majesty was different from a wyvern's fury or a Wyrm's insidious presence. These weren't just creatures, they were symbols, each representing different fears, different struggles, different truths. In the East, dragons took yet another form. They shed the fire and wings of their Western counterparts, becoming serpentine and wise. The Chinese long, with its long, elegant body and flowing whiskers, wasn't a destroyer. It was a bringer of rain, a symbol of power and balance. To the farmers who prayed for their crops, the dragon's blessing wasn't a curse but a gift. Its body, coiled like a river, flowed with the lifeblood of the land. But even in the East, distinctions mattered. The Naga of Southeast Asia, while serpent-like, weren't dragons. They were guardians of the underworld, protectors of hidden treasures. Their power lay not in the skies but in the waters, their movements as fluid and eternal as the rivers they inhabited. Every culture shaped their beasts with purpose. The winged wyverns reflected the speed and savagery of the skies. The earthbound Wyrms mirrored the creeping inevitability of decay. And dragons, with their unmatched majesty, embodied the overwhelming power of nature, gods, and kings. Each form was a reflection of the people who created them, their fears and their reverence written into scales and teeth. Somewhere in the silence of an ancient night, a storyteller's voice broke through, trembling but firm. With every word, the shapes of these creatures formed in the minds of those who listened. The wyvern, a shadow streaking through the sky. The Wyrm, a coiling darkness beneath the earth. And the dragon, towering above them all, the embodiment of fear and awe. Each one was different, yet their stories entwined, their echoes spreading across continents and generations. In every wing beat, every hiss, every roar, there was something timeless. And in their eyes, whether wide with wisdom or narrow with malice, humanity saw itself, its strength, its weakness, and its endless fascination with the unknown. The air crackled with an unnatural energy. Clouds gathered in the heavens, swirling in defiance of the sun, their edges charged with fire and fury. A single bolt of lightning split the sky, and for a fleeting moment, the world stood still. Then came the roar, not the roar of thunder, but something alive, something ancient. It shook the mountains and rippled through the earth, a voice that belonged not to a beast, but to the storm itself. In the minds of those who heard it, there was no doubt. A dragon was awakening. Dragons have never been mere creatures. They are not confined by scales or bones, by wings or fire. They are the heartbeat of the earth, the exhale of a restless sky, the simmering wrath of a mountain. When volcanoes erupt, when seas rage, when winds tear through the trees with unrelenting force, these are the moments dragons are most alive. To those who lived close to the edge of nature's fury, it was impossible not to see dragons in these forces. A volcano was no simple mound of fire and stone. It was a slumbering beast, its molten heart beating deep within. When it erupted, spewing rivers of fire and clouds of ash that turned day into night, it wasn't nature, it was the dragon's rage unleashed. In the myths of Hawaii, Pele's fiery dragons roamed the craters, their breath the source of the lava that carved and consumed the land. They were creation and destruction wrapped into one, their power too immense to comprehend fully. The oceans, too, carried their guardians. When the waves rose higher than mountains, curling into fists of water that pummeled the shores, it was no accident. The sea dragons, serpentine and unyielding, stirred beneath the surface. Their movements churned whirlpools, their fury spawned tsunamis. In Japan, Ryujin was one such dragon, a master of the tides and storms. Fishermen prayed to him for calm waters, knowing his anger could swallow entire fleets without warning. And then there was the wind, the ever-changing breath of the world. It could caress the earth with a gentle sigh, but it could also roar with a fury that toppled trees and flattened villages. People said that dragons lived in the storms, their massive wings stirring hurricanes, their claws striking the earth as bolts of lightning. The great storm dragons didn't just pass over the land, they tore through it, leaving chaos and awe in their wake. In China, dragons were the rainbringers, the lifeblood of the land. They soared through the heavens, their long, sinuous bodies weaving between clouds. When the crops withered under an unrelenting sun, people would call to the dragons, begging them to release their storms and bring life back to the earth. But these dragons weren't just givers of rain, they were also the wild fury of the flood, sweeping away everything in their path when their power was ignored or underestimated. The connection between dragons and nature wasn't just about destruction. In every fire, every storm, every flood, there was also renewal. The fire dragon that raised the forest also cleared the way for new growth. The storm dragon that uprooted trees made room for light to touch the forest floor again. The sea dragon's waves that washed over the land left behind fertile soil, ready for planting. In their ferocity, dragons reminded humanity of nature's balance, its ability to destroy and heal, to take and give. The ancients weren't wrong to see dragons in these forces. What else could capture the scale of a volcano's eruption, the relentless power of a storm, or the unending depth of the sea? Only dragons, vast and eternal, could embody the raw essence of nature. And in their legends, people found a way to explain the unexplainable, to make sense of the chaos that surrounded them. But dragons were more than just explanations. They were warnings. To anger the earth, the sky, or the sea was to wake the dragons. Their wrath wasn't random, it was a response, a mirror to humanity's actions. Those who mined too greedily into the mountains were said to disturb the fire dragons that slept within. Those who polluted the waters risked the vengeance of the sea dragons. And those who ignored the sky's quiet warnings faced the storms that would follow. The stories carried weight, not just as myths, but as reminders of nature's power and fragility. To respect the dragons was to respect the world itself, to understand that the forces humanity couldn't control were not enemies, but guardians. Some nights, when the winds howled and the trees bent under their force, people swore they saw dragons moving in the clouds. Their shapes formed for just an instant before dissolving, as if the storm had revealed its true face. And in the silence that followed the storm, the world felt alive in a way it hadn't before. These elemental guardians were never far away. They were in the rumble of distant thunder, in the restless shifting of the earth, and the endless rhythm of the tides. Their presence was a constant reminder that the world was alive, and its forces were far greater than any single life. And when the fires burned, when the wind screamed, when the seas rose, it wasn't just nature. It was a dragon's roar. The waters churned with an ancient fury, black and endless. From their depths, a form began to rise, vast, coiled, and terrible. Its body seemed to stretch into eternity, its scales glinting like shards of night. Eyes, countless and burning with a knowledge older than time, opened across its sinuous form. This was no simple creature. It was the beginning, the end, the chaos that birthed the world. This was Tiamat. In the myths of Mesopotamia, Tiamat was more than a serpent. She was the ocean itself, the primordial force that existed before the gods, before the heavens, before the earth. Her breath was the wind, her movements the waves, and her rage, the rage of something ancient and betrayed, was a storm that could shatter the stars. When the gods, young and arrogant, sought to impose order on the chaos she embodied, she did not cower. She rose against them, her body twisting through the heavens like a river of darkness, her roar shaking the foundation of all that was. From Tiamat's defeat came creation. Her body, torn apart in battle, was transformed into the world itself. Her ribs became the mountains, her blood the rivers, her tears the oceans. To the people who told her story, she wasn't a monster to be feared. She was the mother of everything, her sacrifice the reason the earth existed at all. But in her defiance, in her refusal to be tamed, she remained alive in every storm, every wave that broke upon the shore with a fury too wild to contain. Far to the east, in the lands of India, another serpent writhed beneath the weight of creation. The coils of Ananta, the endless serpent, stretched beyond sight, cradling the universe in its folds. On its body rested Vishnu, the preserver, who dreamed the world into existence. In this dream, there was no chaos, no destruction, only a vision of harmony. But Ananta was no simple pillow for the divine. It represented infinity, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Its stillness was an absence, it was the calm at the heart of existence, the foundation upon which all things rested. Yet even in this serenity, there were echoes of power. The serpent, after all, was not just a protector but a reminder of the balance that held the universe together. Without it, the dream of creation could shatter into nothingness. Ananta wasn't chaos like Tiamat, but it was still awe-inspiring, its presence an eternal reminder of the vastness of existence. In the frigid lands of the Norse, where winters bit hard and life was a struggle against the elements, another serpent slithered into legend. Nidhogg, the Wyrm of Yggdrasil, gnawed at the roots of the world tree. With each bite, the tree shuddered, its branches quaking under the weight of this unrelenting hunger. Nidhogg wasn't a creator but a destroyer, its presence a shadow over all life. Yet even in its destruction, it had a role to play. The Norse didn't see their world as static. They understood it as a cycle, one where destruction was necessary for renewal. Nidhogg, in its gnawing, brought the tree closer to Ragnarok, the end of all things. But Ragnarok wasn't just an ending, it was the beginning of a new world. The serpent, with its endless hunger, was part of this process, a harbinger of the inevitable change that would sweep across existence. The divine serpents of these myths weren't just beasts. They were forces, symbols of creation and destruction, chaos and balance. Their forms coiled through the stories of humanity, their scales shimmering with meanings too vast to grasp fully. They weren't just beings to fear or revere, they were reflections of the world itself, of the forces that shaped life and death, order and chaos. When the winds howled through the deserts of Mesopotamia, when the rivers flooded the plains of India, when the northern skies burned with the eerie glow of the auroras, people felt the presence of these serpents. They were in the earth, the sea, the heavens, their power unbroken, their stories unforgotten. Tiamat's rage, Ananta's stillness, Nidhogg's hunger, they were all part of the same eternal dance. In the flickering light of ancient fires, storytellers spoke of these beings not to frighten, but to remind. Remind people of the chaos that birthed them, the balance that sustained them, and the destruction that awaited them. The serpents weren't just divine, they were the threads that bound existence together, the unending coils upon which the world rested. The sky seemed alive, its vast expanse painted with shifting hues of gold and crimson. Clouds coiled and danced as though stirred by an unseen hand, and within their swirling depths, something immense began to take shape. It wasn't a bird or a storm, but something ancient and knowing, something whose presence stirred awe in the hearts of all who saw it. The Chinese dragon moved with grace through the heavens, its serpentine body gliding effortlessly, its whiskered face radiating wisdom and majesty. This was no beast of chaos. It was a symbol of life itself, a guardian of balance and harmony. In its shimmering scales were the colors of the seasons, its breath the very winds that carried rain to the fields. To the people of China, the dragon was not a monster to be feared but a sacred being, the embodiment of power tempered by benevolence. The Chinese dragon, or long, wasn't bound by the limitations of its Western counterparts. It needed no wings to soar through the skies, no fire to proclaim its might. Its strength lay in its connection to the cosmos, in the way it bridged the earth and heavens. It moved between worlds with ease, its presence a blessing wherever it chose to dwell. Legend spoke of how the dragon controlled the rain, its movements shaping the rivers and guiding the clouds. Farmers would look to the skies, hoping to catch a glimpse of its celestial dance, for they knew its favor meant bountiful harvests. When the rain fell in just the right amount, nourishing the parched soil, it was said that the dragon had smiled upon the land. But when drought or floods came, it wasn't the dragon's wrath, it was a reminder of the delicate balance humanity must respect. In the courts of emperors, the dragon's image held a different kind of power. Draped across banners, carved into thrones, and woven into the silken robes of royalty, the dragon became a symbol of imperial authority. It wasn't just a creature of myth, it was the very essence of rulership. To sit on the dragon throne was not merely to govern, but to carry the weight of cosmic order, to rule with the wisdom and strength of the dragon itself. The emperor was often called the son of heaven, and the dragon was his divine emblem. Its many features, its horned head, the claws of an eagle, the body of a serpent, spoke of its ability to embody all creatures, all elements, all realms. To the emperor, this wasn't just a flattering comparison. It was a responsibility. Just as the dragon ensured balance in nature, so too must the emperor maintain harmony within his realm. The dragon's presence extended far beyond the palace walls. It flowed through Chinese art, its form coiling across pottery, murals, and jade carvings. Each stroke of ink, each twist of its sinuous body, seemed alive with energy, a testament to the reverence it inspired. Poets wrote of its majesty, describing how it could summon rain with a flick of its tail, how its scales shimmered like 1,000 stars. In the heart of the mountains, where rivers roared and mists lingered, people believed dragons dwelled in hidden palaces. These weren't places of terror, but sanctuaries of beauty, where waterfalls cascaded like liquid silver and the air hummed with the dragon's presence. Travelers who ventured too close to these sacred sites often felt an inexplicable stillness, as though the very land was holding its breath in respect. Dragons weren't just symbols of power, they were also protectors. Villages told stories of how dragons had saved them from catastrophe, guiding rivers away from their homes or shielding them from fierce storms. These weren't mere acts of charity but of guardianship, a reminder that power could be wielded with compassion. The dragon's spirit lived in the people, too. In celebrations, its energy came alive during the famous dragon dances, where long, colorful figures twisted and turned, their movements mimicking the fluid grace of the celestial creature. As drums pounded and cymbals clashed, the dragon seemed to take on a life of its own, bringing luck and prosperity to all who watched. Even in its grandeur, the dragon remained humble. It was never worshipped as a god, never placed above the natural world. Instead, it was seen as a guide, a partner in the dance of existence. Its power was undeniable, but it was a power used to nurture, to protect, to remind humanity of its place within the greater tapestry of life. The dragon wasn't just a creature of legend. It was a force that could be felt in the rains that kissed the earth, in the rivers that carved their way through stone, in the wind that carried the scent of blossoms in spring. To see a dragon in the clouds wasn't just a vision of beauty, it was a glimpse of the profound connection between humanity and the world that sustained them. The river was alive. Its waters surged and eddied with a rhythm that was ancient and knowing. Beneath the moonlight, the surface shimmered like liquid silver, and every ripple seemed to whisper a secret. Then, as the mist began to rise, the air thickened with something unspoken, something vast. The Ryu stirred. Its sinuous form glided through the depths, unseen but undeniable, as if the river itself had awakened. In Japanese lore, dragons were not creatures of fire and fury. They were beings of water, guardians of rivers, lakes, and rainfall. They weren't just part of the landscape, they were the soul of it, their presence woven into every drop of water that touched the earth. Without them, the land would dry, the fields would fail, and life would wither. The Ryu wasn't just a myth, it was the lifeblood of the world. There were stories of travelers who stood at the edge of a sacred lake, gazing into its stillness. In the depths, they swore they saw a pair of glowing eyes, vast and watchful, staring back. Those who were brave enough to speak their wishes aloud often found them granted, not by mere chance, but by the dragon who listened. Yet this benevolence was not given freely, it required respect. The Ryu demanded reverence, for it was a being of both grace and power, as willing to withhold rain as it was to bestow it. Mizuchi, the river serpent, was another manifestation of this connection between dragons and water. It wasn't as grand as the celestial Ryu, but it was no less significant. Mizuchi lived in the rivers, unseen yet ever present, its spirit entwined with the currents that shaped the land. Fishermen told tales of its scales flashing in the water, of its presence felt in the sudden stillness of a river before a storm. Yet Mizuchi was no gentle guardian. When disrespected, it could become a force of vengeance, its wrath felt in the floods that swept away entire villages or the whirlpools that dragged ships into the depths. But those who honored it, who poured offerings into the water and whispered words of thanks, could earn its favor. They knew that Mizuchi's anger was not cruelty but a reminder. Water could give life, but it could just as easily take it away. During the rainy season, the Ryu danced in the skies, its movements hidden in the swirling clouds. Each crack of thunder was its roar, each bolt of lightning the flash of its scales. Farmers prayed for its blessings, for the rains it brought meant life to their crops, a promise of sustenance for their families. But they also feared the storms that came when the dragon's balance was upset, when the rains grew relentless and rivers overflowed their banks. Temples were built to honor these dragons, their sanctuaries often nestled near waterfalls or rivers. Within their walls, priests offered prayers and rituals to ensure the dragon's favor. The air inside these temples was heavy with incense, the flicker of lanterns casting shadows that seemed to dance like water. In these sacred spaces, people felt the presence of the Ryu and Mizuchi most strongly, as though the very water they revered flowed through the walls and into their souls. Legends tell of a young woman who once walked to a river's edge, her hands clasping a small, delicate offering. She had heard the tales of Mizuchi, of its temper and its grace, and in her heart, she carried a desperate hope. As she knelt by the water, the surface rippled, not from the wind, but from something deeper, something alive. She placed her offering, a string of pearls, each bead glinting like the scales of a dragon, into the water. The river grew still. For a moment, there was silence, as though the world itself held its breath. Then, a soft rumble echoed, like the purr of something ancient and satisfied. The rains came the next day, gentle and life-giving, and the villagers knew the dragon had heard her plea. The Ryu wasn't just a symbol of water, it was the embodiment of balance. Its presence reminded people that life depended on harmony, on treating the world with respect. When rivers flowed freely, when rains fell in just the right measure, it was because the Ryu was at peace. But when greed or carelessness disrupted this balance, the dragon's discontent was felt in the torrents that ravaged the land. In the art and poetry of Japan, the Ryu was often depicted coiled around waterfalls or ascending into the clouds, its long, elegant body a perfect mirror of the rivers it guarded. Each stroke of ink, each curve of its form, seemed alive with motion, as though the dragon itself was gliding across the paper. The poets wrote of its majesty, describing how its breath carried the rain and its scales glimmered with the colors of the sea. Even today, the spirit of these water dragons lingers. In the mist that rises from a quiet river at dawn, in the roar of a waterfall that seems to echo with an ancient voice, in the first raindrops of a much-needed storm, their presence can still be felt. The Ryu and Mizuchi are not relics of the past, they are the timeless guardians of the waters, their power flowing through every stream and storm, their grace reflected in every ripple and wave. The cave loomed like the mouth of an enormous beast, its jagged edges curling inward as though they hungered for those who dared to approach. A dim golden glow seeped from its depths, flickering and alive, casting eerie shadows on the cold stone walls. It wasn't the light of a fire or the sun, but something far more sinister. There, amidst the dark and silence, lay the dragon. Its immense body coiled atop a mountain of treasure, every glittering coin and jewel a testament to its unrelenting greed. In the medieval imagination, dragons were not saviors or guardians, but nightmares given form. They were massive, reptilian creatures with scales like iron and eyes that burned with malice. Their wings, leathery and vast, blocked out the sun when they took to the skies, and their breath was a storm of fire and death. To see a dragon was to witness destruction incarnate, to know that nothing could withstand its fury. But it wasn't their strength or ferocity that made these creatures most terrifying, it was their insatiable hunger. Dragons craved wealth, not for its utility but for its sheer existence. Gold, silver, gemstones, they hoarded it all, piling it high in their lairs, far from the reach of human hands. No king's treasury could rival the dragon's hoard, yet for all their riches, they were never satisfied. Legends whispered of villages that were reduced to ash because a single dragon spotted the glint of a gold coin in a merchant's hand. It would swoop down, its roar splitting the air, its claws tearing apart homes, its fire leaving nothing but blackened ruins. Survivors would flee to the forests, their cries drowned by the creature's deafening screech. When the smoke cleared, the dragon would return to its lair, clutching its prize, a cruel grin twisting its monstrous face. In the minds of the people, dragons became symbols of greed taken to its extreme. They had no use for their treasures, no desire to spend or share. They existed only to hoard, to guard their wealth with a ferocity that defied reason. Stories told of knights who ventured into these lairs, drawn by the promise of unimaginable riches. Few returned. Those who did spoke of the dragon's cunning, its piercing eyes that seemed to see through to a man's very soul, its movements as swift and deadly as the strike of lightning. One tale spoke of a knight named Aldrich, who sought to reclaim a treasure stolen by a dragon that had tormented his kingdom for decades. Armed with a sword forged by the greatest smiths and a shield blessed by holy priests, he entered the dragon's cave. The air grew hotter with every step, the stench of sulfur filling his lungs. And then he saw it, the hoard, a sea of gold and jewels that sparkled like the stars. But his awe was short-lived, for the dragon was there, its body coiled and ready, its eyes glowing with a hatred that chilled Aldrich to his core. The battle was fierce. The dragon's flames scorched the very air, its claws tore through stone like paper, and its tail lashed with the force of a hurricane. Aldrich fought bravely, his sword striking true, but for every wound he inflicted, the dragon retaliated with devastating force. When the dust settled, Aldrich stood victorious, his sword buried in the dragon's heart. But as he looked upon the hoard, he felt no triumph. The treasure seemed tainted, its glitter dulled by the lives lost to its allure. In another tale, the dragon Fafnir was once a man, consumed by greed so intense that it transformed him into a monstrous beast. He guarded his treasure with such ferocity that even the gods took notice, sending the hero Sigurd to slay him. Fafnir's story became a warning of what greed could do, of how it could twist and corrupt until nothing human remained. For the people who told these stories, dragons were more than creatures of legend, they were embodiments of a fear that gnawed at their hearts. The fear of losing everything to forces beyond their control. The fear of greed's power to destroy not just others but oneself. Yet, in their role as villains, dragons also served another purpose. They became challenges, foes to be conquered by the brave and pure of heart. To slay a dragon was to overcome greed, to prove that humanity could rise above its darker instincts. The knight who triumphed over the beast didn't just reclaim the treasure, he reclaimed the hope that good could prevail. Even so, the dragon's presence lingered. Its shadow stretched across kingdoms, its roar echoing in the nightmares of the people. And though it was a creature of myth, its lessons were painfully real. In its greed and destruction, the dragon held up a mirror, forcing humanity to confront the darkness within its own soul. The air was heavy with the scent of blooming flowers and fresh rain as the people gathered under the vast expanse of the twilight sky. Their faces tilted upward, their breaths held, for the evening wasn't like any other. Overhead, the colors of the heavens deepened to a rich indigo, and then, there it was. A ripple of light, golden and green, streaked across the horizon like an unspoken promise. It wasn't merely a celestial spectacle. It was the sign of something divine, something that connected the earth below with the endless sky above. Quetzalcoatl. The name stirred the heart like a sacred drumbeat. Not just a serpent, but a feathered serpent, its sleek, sinuous body glimmering with iridescent scales, its vibrant feathers shimmering like 1,000 jewels. It was said to move with the grace of the wind and the authority of the heavens, a creature of unmatched beauty and power. To call it a god would still feel insufficient, for its essence was woven into the very fabric of existence. In Mesoamerican lore, Quetzalcoatl was more than a figure of worship, it was life itself. The embodiment of fertility, knowledge, and creation, its presence was a reminder that every breath of air and drop of rain came from something greater. This divine serpent was not a beast of destruction or greed, but a being of profound duality, bridging the physical and the celestial. In the great cities of the Aztecs and the Maya, towering temples rose in its honor, their steps aligned with the cycles of the sun and stars. These structures weren't just monuments, they were gateways, points where the spirit of Quetzalcoatl could descend and bless the land. During ceremonies, priests adorned in elaborate feathered headdresses would perform intricate rituals, their chants echoing through the stone corridors, calling upon the god to nourish the earth and guide the people. But Quetzalcoatl wasn't just a bringer of rain and renewal. It was also the bearer of knowledge. Legend spoke of how it gifted humanity the maize, the crop that sustained civilizations, and taught them the arts of writing, crafting, and building. In every innovation, in every act of creation, the spirit of the feathered serpent was present, a silent witness to the progress of humankind. One story tells of a time when the earth was barren, a wasteland devoid of life. Quetzalcoatl, moved by compassion, journeyed to the underworld to retrieve the bones of those who had lived before. Through treacherous caverns and shadows thick with despair, it carried the weight of those who had come before, its every step a defiance of death. When it emerged, it mixed the bones with its own blood, breathing life into a new creation, humanity. And yet, Quetzalcoatl was not a god without flaws. In some tales, it struggled with its own nature, its divinity weighed down by the burdens of mortality. There are whispers of betrayal, of exile, and of a departure so mournful that the wind itself wept in its absence. The idea that even a god could falter, could feel the sting of loss and regret, made Quetzalcoatl all the more revered. It wasn't a distant, untouchable being, it was something deeply connected to the human soul, capable of understanding its joys and sorrows. In the vibrant, intricate art of Mesoamerica, the feathered serpent was often depicted in flowing, dynamic poses, its body curling like the winds it ruled. Each scale, each plume was rendered with painstaking detail, as though the artists believed they could summon the god through their work. Its eyes seemed to hold entire worlds within them, and its feathers appeared to pulse with life, a testament to the divine energy it represented. For the people of Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl was not merely a god to be worshipped, but a companion in the grand cycle of existence. Its feathers represented the heavens, its body the earth, and its movement the wind that carried the rains. When storms swept through the valleys, bringing both destruction and renewal, it was seen as Quetzalcoatl's hand at work, reminding humanity of the delicate balance that sustained life. Even as centuries passed and the empires of the Maya and Aztecs fell, the spirit of Quetzalcoatl endured. It lived on in the stories whispered by grandmothers to children, in the symbols carved into stones that weathered the march of time, in the winds that rustled the trees and danced across the waters. To this day, the legacy of the feathered serpent continues to inspire, a testament to the enduring power of belief, beauty, and the bond between humanity and the divine. Quetzalcoatl was never just a myth. It was, and perhaps still is, a reminder that greatness is not defined by might alone but by the wisdom to nurture, the courage to create, and the grace to guide others toward the light. The fire crackled in the stillness of the African night, casting flickering shadows across the faces of those gathered around. The elder, his voice deep and resonant, spoke of a time when the land was wilder, the skies were darker, and the creatures of legend roamed freely. The stars above seemed to listen, twinkling as if they too remembered the tales of the great serpents and dragons that once coiled through the dreams of the people. Among the stories whispered through generations was that of the Ngoma Lungundu, the drum of the dead. It was said that this sacred relic held the power to summon not just spirits but a fearsome serpent that guarded its secrets. This serpent wasn't like the dragons of Europe or Asia, with fiery breath or feathered wings. Instead, it was a creature of the earth and rivers, its body as long as the winding Nile, its movements slow and deliberate, like the turning of the seasons. Its presence was neither wholly malevolent nor entirely benevolent. It was balance, a living representation of the forces that shaped the world. In the mountains of Mali, another legend thrived, one that spoke of the Edo Huido, a cosmic serpent said to have shaped the earth itself. With its immense body, it carried the land on its back, moving through the oceans and rivers to give life to barren soil. When the rains came, heavy and thunderous, the people would say it was Edo Huido's way of feeding the earth. Yet, they also feared its wrath, for if it ever stirred too suddenly, the earth would quake, and entire villages could be swallowed in its restless movements. Edo Wido wasn't just a being of legend, but a divine entity, one that embodied both creation and destruction. Its scales were said to shimmer like the colors of the rainbow, a sight so breathtaking that those who gazed upon it were forever changed. Some stories even claimed it would return to the heavens when its work on earth was done, coiling among the stars to rest in eternal peace. Further south, in the rainforests of the Congo, the myth of the Kongamato lived on. Unlike other dragons, Kongamato was a creature of terror. With leathery wings that spanned the breadth of the sky and a sharp, serrated beak, it was a harbinger of doom. The villagers told stories of how it would rise from the depths of swamps at dusk, its haunting screeches echoing across the treetops. Those who claimed to have seen it described its eyes as glowing embers, piercing through the darkness. It wasn't gold or treasure that Kongamato guarded, it was its territory, an ancient domain untouched by time. In Zimbabwe, there was the tale of Nyami Nyami, the river dragon of the Zambezi. Its form was a blend of serpent and fish, with scales that gleamed like silver in the sunlight. Nyami Nyami was both protector and punisher, the lifeblood of the river and the spirit of the people who lived along its banks. When the Kariba Dam was built, disrupting the river's flow, the locals said it angered Nyami Nyami. Floods swept through the valley, and engineers spoke of mysterious whirlpools that seemed to arise from nowhere. The elders nodded knowingly, whispering that the dragon was fighting to reclaim its home. Nyami Nyami wasn't just a force of nature, it was an emotional connection to the river, a symbol of survival and resilience. To the Tonga people, it represented their history, their struggles, and their unyielding bond with the land. When offerings were made to Nyami Nyami, it wasn't out of fear but respect, a recognition of its role in the delicate balance of life and death. Even in the arid deserts of northern Africa, where the sand seemed endless and unyielding, stories of dragons persisted. The Dahomey people told of a serpent that guarded hidden wells and oases. Its presence was marked by strange patterns in the sand, spiraling trails that vanished with the wind. Travelers who sought water in its domain were said to encounter visions, moments where time itself seemed to stand still. Some claimed these visions revealed the serpent's true form, a being of pure energy, its body shimmering like a mirage, its eyes holding the secrets of the desert. These dragons and serpents were not the towering, fire-breathing beasts of other lands. They were deeply rooted in the rhythms of Africa, their stories woven into the landscapes they inhabited. They reflected the continent's vast diversity, from its lush rainforests to its sprawling savannas, from its mighty rivers to its unforgiving deserts. For the people who told these stories, these beings were not just myths, but living reminders of the forces that shaped their lives. They were protectors, destroyers, and everything in between, embodiments of the beauty and power of the natural world. In their shimmering scales, in their haunting cries, and in their unseen presence, they carried the hopes, fears, and dreams of countless generations. The elder's voice faded as the fire dimmed, leaving only the crackle of embers and the rustle of the wind. Yet the stories lingered, alive in the hearts of those who listened, as eternal as the stars above. The forest was silent, save for the rustling of leaves and a breeze that carried the faintest hint of smoke. The villagers huddled together, their eyes wide with fear, their whispers barely audible. Somewhere beyond the treetops, a shadow moved, massive and serpentine, coiling with a grace that belied its sheer size. It wasn't the size alone that struck terror into their hearts, it was the eyes. Eyes like molten gold, burning with intelligence and something far darker, a cunning, calculated malice that could outwit the cleverest of hunters. This was no ordinary creature. This was a Zmei, the fire-breathing beast of Slavic lore, a being of immense power and relentless will. Unlike the dragons of other lands, the Zmei was not a mindless destroyer. It was a manipulator, a schemer, a creature of profound complexity that could charm as easily as it could incinerate. In the old tales, the Zmei was often described as having multiple heads, each one capable of independent thought. These heads did not merely roar, they spoke, weaving words like a spider spins its web, ensnaring the unwary. Travelers who encountered the Zmei and survived spoke of voices that resonated like thunder and honey, voices that promised riches and glory, only to deliver ruin and despair. But it wasn't just the voice or the fire that set the Zmei apart. It was its mind. This creature thrived on games of wit, delighting in challenges that tested the resolve of those who dared to confront it. In one tale, a prince set out to slay a Zmei that had been terrorizing his kingdom, stealing cattle and hoarding treasures in its lair. When he finally stood before the beast, sword drawn, the Zmei did not attack. Instead, it laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that shook the very ground, and proposed a riddle. "If you answer true, I shall leave this land and trouble your people no more. But if you falter, your life is mine." The prince, though brave, was no match for the Zmei's cunning. His answer was wrong, and in a flash of fire and fury, the beast claimed its prize. The story didn't end there, though. The prince's younger sister, a girl of quiet determination and sharp intellect, stepped forward. She did not wield a sword. Instead, she came armed with words, her wit as sharp as any blade. When the Zmei posed another riddle, she answered true. The beast, bound by its own word, retreated into the mountains, leaving the kingdom in peace. The Zmei's cunning was not its only hallmark. Its connection to fire was both literal and symbolic. In Slavic culture, fire represented transformation, a force that could destroy but also purify, that could consume yet also illuminate. The Zmei embodied this duality, its fiery breath both a weapon and a metaphor for the trials faced by those who stood against it. In one tale, a farmer's son ventured into the lair of a Zmei to reclaim his family's stolen livestock. The journey was harrowing, the path lined with bones and the air thick with smoke. When he finally reached the heart of the lair, he found the Zmei coiled around its hoard, a pile of gold and jewels that glittered like captured sunlight. The beast's eyes flicked open, and in that moment, the boy knew he was facing not just a creature of fire, but a test of his own courage and resolve. The Zmei spoke, its voice low and menacing. "What would you take, boy? The gold, the cattle, or your life?" The boy, trembling but resolute, replied, "None of these. I come for my family's honor." The Zmei's laughter echoed through the cavern, a sound as hot and unrelenting as its flames. But it did not attack. Instead, it uncoiled and allowed the boy to leave, his cattle following close behind. Some say the Zmei respected his bravery, others believe it saw in him a spark of its own fire, a kindred spirit in the endless dance of challenge and survival. Not all encounters with the Zmei ended in such tales of victory, though. In the darker corners of Slavic myth, the beast was a harbinger of doom, an unstoppable force that razed villages and devoured entire families. These stories served as warnings, cautionary tales about the dangers of hubris and the cost of underestimating a creature whose power was matched only by its intelligence. Yet even in these tales of destruction, there was a strange kind of respect for the Zmei. It was a creature of balance, its existence a reminder of the thin line between order and chaos. It was not evil for the sake of evil, it was a force of nature, a challenge to be faced and, if possible, overcome. In some stories, the Zmei took on a more benevolent role, guarding sacred places and ancient treasures. These tales painted the beast as a protector, a being whose wrath was reserved for those who sought to desecrate or plunder. One legend spoke of a Zmei that lived beneath a great oak tree, its roots twisting deep into the earth. This tree was said to hold the secrets of the universe, its branches touching the heavens and its roots drinking from the waters of the underworld. The Zmei guarded the tree fiercely, allowing only the pure of heart to approach. Such stories added layers to the Zmei's character, transforming it from a mere monster into a complex symbol of wisdom and power. It was a creature that could inspire both fear and admiration, a being as unpredictable as the flames it wielded. Even now, the tales of the Zmei linger in the lands where it once roamed. They are told in hushed tones by firelight, their words carrying the weight of centuries. They remind us of a time when the world was wilder, when the line between the natural and the supernatural was blurred, and when dragons ruled not just the skies, but the hearts and minds of those who dared to dream. The icy waters of the Arctic are a place of stark beauty and unforgiving danger. Beneath the endless stretch of frozen tundra and shimmering auroras, the ocean churns with mysteries older than time. Inuit elders speak of the sea's breath, how it whispers through the cracks in the ice, carrying secrets of creatures that swim below. Among these whispers are tales of beings so vast and powerful they could reshape the tides themselves, serpentine monsters that coil through the freezing depths, their forms woven into legend and fear. The Arctic sea serpents are not mere beasts, they are the pulse of the ocean, spirits entwined with the lifeblood of the icy waters. Some stories tell of creatures so enormous that their bodies could encircle entire islands. Their scales, glittering like the frozen crust of the sea, shone with an unearthly light, reflecting the auroras that danced above. These beings weren't just part of the landscape, they were the landscape, ancient guardians of the polar expanse, embodiments of its might and mystery. For the Inuit, the ocean has always been alive, a force to be reckoned with. The serpents that dwell within it are more than animals, they are spirits, embodiments of the balance between survival and destruction. Hunters returning from long journeys tell of seeing enormous shadows passing beneath their kayaks, the faint glow of massive eyes breaking the blackness of the abyss. The serpents were said to rise from the water in times of great turmoil, their presence a harbinger of shifting winds or impending storms. One tale tells of a young hunter named Killick who ventured far from his village in search of seals. The sea was calm, the ice silent beneath his sled. But as night fell, the northern lights blazed brighter than he had ever seen, their green and blue ribbons reflecting on the frozen water. Suddenly, the stillness broke, a low, rumbling sound, like the groan of the earth itself. He turned to see a massive form rising from the water, its head crowned with icicles and its eyes glowing with an ancient light. The serpent spoke, its voice deep and resonant, like the crack of icebergs splitting apart. It warned Killick of a coming storm, a blizzard so fierce it would bury the land and sea alike. Terrified but awed, the hunter returned to his village, his heart heavy with the weight of the creature's words. True to its warning, the storm came, but the village was prepared, their lives saved by the serpent's ominous intervention. Across the Arctic Circle, the Norse spoke of serpents as well, their tales carried by the same cold winds that shaped the myths of the Inuit. But where the Inuit saw their sea serpents as spirits and guardians, the Norse envisioned something darker, more apocalyptic. The Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, was said to encircle the world, its body so vast that it bit its own tail, holding the earth together in an eternal, crushing grip. The Norse believed that Jormungandr was destined to rise from the sea during Ragnarok, the end of the world. When it did, its coils would shake the earth, its venom would poison the skies, and its battle with Thor would signal the collapse of all creation. Yet even in its role as a bringer of destruction, Jormungandr was a symbol of balance, a reminder of the interconnectedness of all things. There is a story of a Norse fisherman who once encountered a creature he believed to be Jormungandr. While casting his net into the frigid waters, he felt a tug so strong it nearly pulled him into the sea. As he struggled to reel in his catch, the water around him churned violently, and a massive head emerged, its jaws filled with jagged teeth. The fisherman froze, his heart pounding as he stared into the creature's golden eyes. The serpent did not attack. Instead, it steadied him, as if weighing his worth. After a moment that felt like an eternity, it released the net and disappeared beneath the waves, leaving the fisherman trembling but alive. When he returned to his village, he spoke of the encounter with reverence, convinced that the serpent had spared him for reasons he could never understand. In both Inuit and Norse legends, these aquatic dragons were not merely threats to be vanquished, they were forces to be respected, their existence a testament to the power and unpredictability of the natural world. Their presence in the icy waters served as a reminder of humanity's smallness, of the fragility of life in a world dominated by forces far greater than ourselves. Even today, the Arctic remains a place of mystery, its frozen expanse hiding secrets that may never be revealed. But in the whispers of the wind and the shifting patterns of the auroras, one can still feel the echo of those ancient tales. They remind us that some stories are too big to be forgotten, too powerful to be silenced by the passage of time. The serpents of the Arctic live on, not just in the icy waters, but in the hearts of those who still look to the sea with wonder and fear. A knight stands alone on a windswept hill, his armor gleaming faintly under a pale sun. Before him, the ground trembles, the air thick with the scent of sulfur and smoke. From the depths of a shadowed cave, a sound rumbles forth, a growl so low and primal it feels like the earth itself is groaning. Slowly, the creature emerges, its vast wings unfolding with an ominous grace, its scales catching the light like molten gold. The knight's grip tightens on his sword, every fiber of his being screaming to turn and run. But he stays. He must. Honor demands it. Dragons in Arthurian legend were not just monsters, they were tests. They stood as the ultimate trial, a measure of a knight's courage, strength, and virtue. The beast was more than an enemy, it was an embodiment of chaos, greed, and terror. To face it was to confront one's deepest fears, to prove oneself worthy of the code of chivalry. The stories told of dragons whose eyes burned like fire, their breath scorching the land into ash. They guarded treasures that tempted the soul, gold, jewels, and relics of unspeakable power. But the treasure was never just physical. The true prize lay in the battle itself, in the transformation of a knight into a hero. In one tale, Sir Balin, the knight with two swords, ventured into a dark wood where a dragon had made its lair. The creature had ravaged the countryside, its hunger insatiable, its fury unmatched. When Balin approached the lair, he did so not for fame or reward but because the villagers begged him for deliverance. Their cries haunted him, their desperation seared into his soul. The fight was brutal. Balin's swords clashed against the dragon's armored hide, sparks flying with every strike. The beast roared, its tail whipping through the air, shattering trees like brittle twigs. Blood and fire filled the night as the two battled, neither willing to yield. Finally, with a cry that echoed through the heavens, Balin plunged his blade deep into the dragon's heart. As the creature fell, its body collapsing into the earth, Balin knelt beside it, his breath ragged, his face streaked with soot and tears. He had won, but the cost was written in every wound he bore. In the tales of King Arthur, dragons were not always foes. In the prophecies of Merlin, the red dragon of Britain was a symbol of strength and destiny, rising triumphant over the white dragon of Saxon invaders. Merlin himself saw the dragons in a vision, their battle foretelling the struggle for Britain's soul. The red dragon's victory was not just a triumph of arms, but a promise of a brighter future, a beacon of hope in the darkness of conflict. Knights who faced dragons were expected to embody the highest ideals of chivalry, bravery, loyalty, and selflessness. They did not fight for glory alone, but for something greater, the protection of the innocent, the preservation of justice. Each dragon slain was a step toward restoring order to a world teetering on the brink of chaos. Yet, the stories were never simple. Dragons were not mere beasts, they were ancient, wise, and often misunderstood. Some legends whispered of dragons that spoke in riddles, offering knights a chance to prove their worth not through violence but through wit and compassion. A knight who could see beyond the fearsome exterior to the creature's hidden wisdom was considered truly noble. One such tale is that of Sir Percival, who encountered a dragon while searching for the Holy Grail. The beast was immense, its body scarred from countless battles. It did not attack but watched him with eyes filled with a strange, sorrowful intelligence. Percival lowered his sword, his heart telling him that this creature was not his enemy. The dragon, in turn, shared a truth that guided him on his quest, a truth he could only hear because he chose mercy over might. Dragons in Arthurian legend held a mirror to the knights who faced them. They revealed the strength of their character, the purity of their intentions. For every knight who triumphed, there was another who faltered, undone by arrogance or greed. The dragon did not care for titles or lineage, it cared only for the truth of the heart. In the end, the stories were not about dragons at all. They were about the knights who dared to stand before them, who faced their fears and emerged changed. The dragon was the fire that forged them, the trial that transformed them from mere men into legends. And though the beasts may have been vanquished, their roar echoed on, a reminder that true heroism lies not in the sword but in the soul. A crimson dragon rears on its hind legs, claws extended and mouth open in a silent roar, etched onto a tattered flag. The wind carries it high above a battlefield soaked with the sweat and fear of countless soldiers. To those who follow it, the dragon is more than a symbol. It is their spirit, their strength, their unwavering defiance in the face of chaos. Its wings speak of freedom, its fire of power, and its unyielding stance of an indomitable will. Dragons found their way into the very fabric of human identity, emblazoned on shields, banners, and family crests. They became symbols of both might and mystery, a way to tell the world that those who bore their image were not to be trifled with. In heraldry, dragons were crafted with intention, every scale and talon a reflection of ideals held dear by the bearers. A knight might ride into battle with a green wyvern stitched onto his surcoat, signaling cunning and vigilance to both his allies and his enemies. A noble family might adopt a golden dragon for their crest, its color signifying wealth and power, its form a reminder that their authority was both awe-inspiring and unyielding. In the courts of kings, the dragon stood tall, a silent declaration of dominance that words could not match. But not all dragons of heraldry were symbols of brute force. They often carried stories, subtle whispers of what lay beneath the surface. One crest might show a dragon pierced by a sword, a testament to a family's hard-won victory over adversity. Another might display a dragon coiled protectively around an egg, its posture fierce but nurturing, a promise to safeguard those under its care. In these designs, dragons became mirrors, reflecting the values and ambitions of the people they represented. Yet, their allure did not stop with mere identification. Dragons crept into the allegories of morality, wrapping their sinuous bodies around lessons meant to guide and inspire. In one tale, a dragon guards a hoard of treasure deep within a mountain. It is vast and gleaming, a sight to make any man's heart ache with longing. Yet the dragon does not sleep. It watches, its golden eyes unblinking, waiting for the foolish or the greedy to step too close. This dragon is not just a creature but an embodiment of avarice itself, a living warning of the dangers that come from coveting too much. Another dragon might terrorize a village, demanding offerings of livestock and gold. But its hunger cannot be sated, and soon it asks for more, first a child, then another. A brave soul steps forward, not with a sword, but with wisdom. By recognizing the dragon's torment and finding its hidden truth, they bring peace, not through death, but understanding. Such stories were not just tales, they were moral compasses, reminders of humanity's better nature. Dragons, though fierce, were not always villains. They were challenges to overcome, not through sheer strength, but through cleverness, courage, and virtue. Even in their most ferocious depictions, dragons carried a strange beauty. On the stained glass of a chapel, a scarlet dragon entwines with a golden lion, their battle captured in eternal stillness. The dragon's tail whips around the lion's flank, its fire illuminating the lion's mane. Together, they tell a story not of destruction but of balance, of chaos meeting order, of power tempered by nobility. On a family crest displayed in an ancient hall, a dragon curls protectively around a tree. Its wings are folded, its talons sharp but resting. The image speaks of guardianship, of strength used not to destroy but to preserve. Generations pass beneath its gaze, each one reminded of the legacy they are bound to uphold. Even as dragons stood for power and pride, they also bore the weight of responsibility. To adopt a dragon was to take on its virtues and its flaws. It was a symbol of ambition, yes, but also of restraint. For what good is strength if it turns to tyranny? What value does fire hold if it consumes everything in its path? In the quiet chambers of ancient castles, where banners whispered of forgotten glories, the dragon's image held sway. It was both a boast and a promise, a declaration of what was and what could be. And as long as dragons adorned shields and flags, as long as their stories lived in the minds of those who dreamed of greatness, they remained immortal. To some, a dragon's roar was a challenge, to others, a warning. But to all, it was a call to something greater. It spoke of battles fought, of treasures earned, of lives transformed by the fire that burns brightest in the hearts of those who dare to claim their destiny. And so, the dragon soared, not just in the skies of legend, but in the hearts of all who saw it and believed. The dragon rose from the shadows, its scales glistening like obsidian under the pale moonlight. Its eyes were pits of molten fire, gazing out with an intensity that seemed to pierce the soul. Coils of smoke curled from its nostrils as it let out a low, rumbling growl. It was not just a beast, it was the weight of every hidden fear, every whispered temptation, every shadowed corner of the human heart where sin dared to dwell. In Christian traditions, dragons became more than myth, they became a reflection of the eternal battle between good and evil. Their serpentine bodies, steeped in fire and fury, came to symbolize the cunning of Satan himself, slithering into Eden and bringing ruin to paradise. In the dragon's imposing form, people saw the embodiment of sin, deceptive, relentless, and all-consuming. The imagery was stark and unforgettable. Satan, cast out of heaven, fell like lightning, transforming into a great dragon that swept its tail across the stars, dragging them from the heavens. The dragon's fall mirrored humanity's fall, a stark reminder of pride's devastating cost. Its wings, vast and shadowy, seemed to stretch over all creation, threatening to snuff out the light with the suffocating darkness of despair. But even in the face of this overwhelming power, there was hope. Across stained glass windows and medieval manuscripts, the image of a saint stood firm. Saint Michael, clad in radiant armor, his sword gleaming with divine light, faced the dragon with unflinching resolve. Their battle was not just one of strength, but of purpose. The dragon's fury crashed like waves against the immovable rock of faith. Michael's sword struck true, and the beast writhed in its death throes, a vivid reminder that evil, no matter how great, could never conquer the divine. St. George, too, rose as a symbol of this struggle. His legend was painted with vivid strokes, a knight in shining armor, astride a noble steed, facing a monstrous dragon that had terrorized a village. The dragon demanded sacrifices, first livestock, then children. When the king's own daughter was offered, George arrived, not with hesitation but with determination. His lance pierced the dragon's hide, and the beast fell. The village was saved, its faith renewed, and the dragon, once a harbinger of doom, became a testament to the power of courage and righteousness. Yet, the dragon's role was more than just an adversary to saints. It became a mirror, reflecting the flaws and weaknesses that lurked within the human soul. Greed, envy, wrath, each sin found its echo in the dragon's fiery breath, its unyielding hunger, its predatory gaze. The dragon was not just an external foe but an internal one, a reminder that the greatest battles are often fought within. In sermons and stories, the dragon's hoard became a cautionary tale. Its glittering treasure, amassed over centuries, was a symbol of greed's seductive pull. The more the dragon acquired, the more it wanted, its hunger insatiable. It was a warning to those who sought wealth above all else: what you own might one day own you. The dragon's fire, destructive and uncontrollable, spoke of wrath. Its flames consumed everything in their path, leaving nothing but ash and ruin. It was a stark image of what unchecked anger could do, not just to others but to oneself. In the dragon's fiery rampages, people saw the dangers of letting rage fester and burn unchecked. And then there was the dragon's cunning, its ability to lie in wait, striking when least expected. This was the essence of deceit, the twisting of truth into something unrecognizable. The dragon, with its forked tongue and hypnotic gaze, was a warning of how easily lies could coil around one's heart, squeezing the life from it. But even as dragons were painted as harbingers of sin and destruction, their defeat was a reminder of redemption. In their triumph over the dragon, saints and heroes showed that sin, no matter how monstrous, could be overcome. Through faith, courage, and virtue, the beast could be slain, its shadow dispelled by the light. In some tales, the dragon was not killed but tamed, its wild nature subdued by a higher power. This, too, was a powerful allegory. It suggested that even the darkest parts of the human soul could be redeemed, that sin could be transformed into something that served the greater good. The dragon, once a symbol of chaos, became a testament to the transformative power of grace. Yet, the stories did not shy away from the dragon's terrifying nature. They embraced its raw power, its otherworldly majesty, as a reminder of the stakes involved. The dragon was a creature of myth, yes, but also of meaning. It was a challenge to rise above, a test of one's faith and strength. To face the dragon was to confront the very essence of evil. Its scales were the weight of temptation, its claws the grip of despair, its fire the consuming nature of sin. But its defeat was a promise that no matter how great the darkness, the light could always prevail. And so, the dragon roared, its voice echoing through the ages. It was a sound both terrible and beautiful, a reminder of humanity's greatest fears and its greatest hopes. In its fiery breath and shadowed wings, people saw not just a beast but the eternal struggle, the battle between sin and salvation, chaos and order, darkness and light. The artist's brush hovered above the canvas, trembling as if it could feel the power of the image waiting to be born. A dragon coiled in the shadows of the painter's mind, its form a blend of terror and grace. As the first stroke kissed the canvas, it was as if the creature itself stirred to life, a beast born of smoke, scales, and legend. During the Renaissance, dragons roared back into the world of art and literature, not as simple monsters but as enigmas. They were creations that bridged the old world and the new, embodying the tension between reason and mystery, knowledge and wonder. For centuries, they had lingered in the recesses of forgotten lore, feared and revered. Now, they emerged once more, shaped by the hands of masters who dared to give form to the ineffable. Leonardo da Vinci, in his detailed sketches, imagined dragons not as impossibilities but as creatures that could exist. Their wings spanned vast distances, their sinewy bodies coiled with strength, their eyes burned with knowing intelligence. He studied anatomy, observing birds and reptiles, merging the natural with the fantastical. His dragons were not simply beasts, but living forces, blending imagination with the meticulous precision of science. The writers, too, breathed fire into the dragon's myth. In their words, the beasts flew higher than mountains and burrowed deeper than human fear. Edmund Spenser's The Fairy Queen painted the dragon as an embodiment of immense, consuming evil, challenging knights and kings to rise above their mortal limits. The dragon's roar echoed through the verses, a reminder of struggles that were both external and internal. Artworks of the time were daring, their colors vibrant, their subjects bold. Artists wielded dragons like flames, using them to ignite the senses and provoke thought. In Albrecht Dürer's engravings, dragons loomed in biblical scenes, their forms sinuous and menacing, often framing the delicate beauty of saints or the agony of sinners. These dragons were not merely creatures, they were symbols of a shifting world, where chaos and order danced together in a fragile balance. Yet, not all dragons were monstrous. Some were majestic, regal beings that commanded respect rather than fear. The Renaissance brought forth a vision of dragons that was layered and nuanced, reflecting the complexities of human thought. The beast that once symbolized destruction now became a guardian of wisdom, a keeper of ancient secrets. In countless tapestries, dragons curled around trees, their bodies woven with the same care given to kings and gods. They stood as protectors of the mythical and the divine. Their scales glimmered with gold and silver threads, catching the light as if they carried the sun and moon within them. Literature painted dragons with even broader strokes. In tales inspired by Renaissance humanism, dragons represented the boundless curiosity of the age. They were challenges to be faced, horizons to be reached. They stood guard over the unknown, daring humanity to seek and to question. One of the most evocative images of the time came from the philosopher and writer John Milton, whose Paradise Lost gave Satan the form of a great dragon. He was a being of overwhelming beauty and terrible intent, his presence both awe-inspiring and chilling. In his portrayal, the dragon was no longer a mere foe, it was the embodiment of defiance, pride, and the unquenchable thirst for power. The Renaissance dragon was not confined to pages or paintings. Sculptors carved them from marble, their forms twisting in motion, capturing the vitality of creatures that existed on the edges of reality. Gargoyles atop cathedrals bore the faces of dragons, their mouths frozen in silent roars. They watched over cities, their stony gazes both warning and protecting, reminding people of the thin veil between the earthly and the divine. Even the architects of gardens found inspiration in dragons. In Italy, the Bomarzo Gardens featured grotesque sculptures, and among them, dragons loomed large. These creatures, carved into stone, seemed to erupt from the earth itself, their expressions fierce, their forms wild. They became part of the natural landscape, blurring the lines between the real and the fantastical. Dragons of the Renaissance were painted with humanity's dreams and fears, their forms vast enough to hold contradictions. They were terrifying and beautiful, chaotic and ordered, symbols of destruction and harbingers of hope. They burned brighter and darker than ever before, their fire illuminating the best and worst of human nature. It was an age that dared to ask questions, to challenge old beliefs, and dragons became its perfect metaphor. They were the unknown, the wild, the untamed forces that humans both yearned to conquer and feared to understand. They whispered of mysteries that lay just beyond reach, tantalizing and dangerous. And yet, dragons also offered a kind of reassurance. In their ancient forms, they connected the Renaissance to the past, to myths that had survived countless generations. They reminded people that even in a world of change, some stories were eternal. Through art and literature, dragons carried those stories forward, their wings spanning centuries, their roars echoing through time. By the flickering light of candles in a scholar's study, by the vivid colors of frescoes in grand cathedrals, by the delicate lines of a poet's quill, dragons surged back into the world, uncontainable and unforgettable. Their flames warmed the Renaissance, bringing both fear and fascination, daring humanity to look beyond the horizon and confront the infinite. In the twilight of an ancient battlefield, shadows stretched long and menacing, weaving themselves into shapes that could only exist in the fevered dreams of fear. Among them, a figure moved, sleek, sharp, and poised to strike. Its wings cut through the dim air like jagged blades, its serpentine tail coiled with the promise of destruction. This was not the mighty dragon of towering legends, but something leaner, fiercer. A creature that carried no grandeur, only raw, honed menace. This was a wyvern. Smaller than their dragonkin, wyverns emerged as symbols of cunning and savagery, their bodies built not for majesty but for the art of swift, ruthless combat. Their two limbs, often ending in talons sharper than any forged steel, made them agile predators of both myth and mind. They lacked the fire of dragons, but their venom, dripping, deadly, was a punishment far worse. Myths spoke of these two-limbed terrors as if they slithered between worlds, too animalistic to carry the wisdom of dragons, yet far too intelligent to be dismissed as mere beasts. In the windswept crags of ancient Europe, they were whispered about in hushed tones, lurking in caves or atop jagged cliffs. To encounter a wyvern was to face a creature unburdened by the weight of treasure or the pride of dominion. It sought only survival, which often meant someone else's end. Artists found their forms irresistible. On coats of arms, wyverns stood as warnings rather than inspirations. Their lean frames and narrowed eyes radiated a different kind of power, one that spoke of primal instincts rather than calculated wisdom. Where a dragon might be a monarch, a wyvern was the lone mercenary, a sword with no allegiance except to its own hunger. In heraldry, wyverns marked families who boasted of resilience and ferocity. They were not symbols of sprawling empires or celestial balance, but of raw, unyielding strength. The two-limbed distinction became their signature, a stark simplicity that stripped away the excess of wings and tails and brought forth their essence, a creature born to dominate through speed and precision. Literature, too, captured their essence with vivid detail. Wyverns were portrayed as adversaries more relentless than any dragon, for they lacked the hordes and egos that made dragons vulnerable. They did not guard castles or demand tributes, they struck swiftly, their venom a silent killer that seeped into the veins of both their prey and the stories told about them. Yet, within this ferocity lay a strange elegance. Their movements, as described by poets and chroniclers, were almost hypnotic. Their wings unfurled with the grace of a dancer's outstretched arms, and their tails, long, sinuous, and often barbed, moved as if conducting some dark symphony. Wyverns became a reflection of the fears that lived in the shadows of human ambition. They did not represent grand battles or moral lessons, but rather the lurking dangers that waited at the edges of civilization. They were the untamed wilds personified, reminders that not everything could be subdued or controlled. In mythology, they were often the harbingers of doom, their appearance signaling that something fragile, an alliance, a kingdom, a life, was about to be shattered. The wyvern did not negotiate or roar its arrival, it came silently, venom in its fangs, and left only devastation in its wake. And yet, for all their menace, wyverns held a certain allure. They were creatures that embodied the beauty of simplicity, their streamlined forms devoid of the excesses that often defined their dragon counterparts. This starkness made them unforgettable, their silhouettes etched into tapestries, their tails winding through the margins of medieval manuscripts like living ink. Artists and storytellers embraced their uniqueness, using wyverns as symbols of the unexpected. They were not the noble dragons of tales, but they were no less captivating. Their lack of grandeur only heightened their danger, making them a potent reminder that power does not always come in familiar forms. When knights rode into battle with wyverns emblazoned on their shields, they carried more than a symbol of strength, they carried the essence of a creature that thrived on survival against all odds. In a world of towering dragons and sprawling kingdoms, the wyvern carved out its place not through might, but through sheer tenacity. It reminded those who faced it that even the smaller, leaner beings could wield devastation. And so, the wyvern slithered into legend, its two limbs bearing it through centuries of tales and imaginations. It flew not as a king of the skies, but as a shadow, always watching, always waiting. It was a creature that left no room for hesitation, a force that demanded respect through the sharpness of its claws and the venom in its bite. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, and the low hum of the forest seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. In the distance, the rustling of leaves grew louder, sharp and frantic, as something slithered through the underbrush. Eyes, hidden beneath the shadows of ancient trees, tracked its movements, long, sinuous, coiling around the roots of the old world. It was not a creature of wing or flame but of earth and shadow, its body a winding mass of terror. A Wyrm. There was no grand roar, no flashing scales, but instead a quiet menace that filled the forest with dread. Wyrms did not announce their arrival, they simply were. Serpentine legends, slipping between the cracks of ancient European myth, were their home. From the foggy hills of Scandinavia to the mist-laden moors of Britain, the Wyrm made its presence known in whispered tales and shuddered glances. In the Viking heartlands, the Wyrm was often described as a vast, earthbound serpent, no wings, no fire, just a body that seemed to stretch endlessly beneath the ground. It was the stuff of nightmares, slithering through the roots of the world tree, its path undisturbed by the hands of gods or men. Sometimes, it was spoken of in the same breath as Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, whose enormous form encircled the earth, twisting and turning like the very essence of chaos. The Wyrm was no less frightening, though it dwelled deeper, often hidden away in caves or beneath rivers, where its presence was felt more than seen. In British legends, the Wyrm was often a guardian of treasure, a beast whose love for gold was rivaled only by its lust for destruction. These Wyrms were not just animals but symbols of greed, power, and the unyielding grip of nature. Their coils were said to protect riches buried in the earth, and no man, no matter how brave, could approach without facing the wrath of the beast. Like the Wyrms in Scandinavian stories, these creatures were not easily slain. Their power lay not in flames or claws, but in their ability to outlast any enemy, waiting with patient persistence until their prey was trapped by their very presence. These Wyrms had a strange allure, woven into the fabric of the stories where heroes were often tasked with confronting them. But unlike dragons, who were slain by great knights wielding swords of legend, the Wyrms presented a different challenge, a test of endurance. It was said that the Wyrm's poison could seep into the soil itself, slowly corrupting the land, turning vibrant meadows into lifeless plains. To fight a Wyrm was to risk losing oneself to the earth itself, to sink into the depths of its grasp. One of the most notorious Wyrms in British legend was the Lambton Worm. The tale was one of regret, punishment, and redemption. A young man, James Lambton, was a wild spirit, unafraid of the dangers of the world. Yet, when he failed to kill a Wyrm, he doomed his entire family. The Wyrm grew in size, terrorizing the people of the land, its coils wrapping around the countryside, choking life wherever it slithered. When James returned as a man, older and wiser, he fought the creature in a battle that was as much about his soul as it was about the Wyrm's destruction. The Wyrm wasn't just a monster, it was the consequence of his own choices, a reflection of the damage caused by his earlier recklessness. This Wyrm wasn't merely a guardian of treasure, but a manifestation of human folly, a reminder that some sins cannot be undone. As much as the Wyrm represented danger, it also symbolized the deep, unrelenting forces of nature that humans could never truly control. It was the embodiment of the Earth's secret heart, the part of the world that no sword could touch and no knight could conquer. The Wyrm's path through history was one of shadow and terror, but it also served as a reminder of the limits of human power. In Scandinavian lore, the Wyrm was often tied to the earth itself. It was seen as a creature of the ground, just as Jormungandr was tied to the sea. The Wyrm's coils were the undercurrent of history, slow, inevitable, and unstoppable. These creatures were feared because they represented the forces that shaped the world in ways that could not be undone, forces that were as old as the stones themselves. To confront them was to confront the harshest elements of nature, the deep, unyielding cold of the earth, the poison that ran through the veins of the land, the part of the world where humanity had no sway. Yet, in these legends, the Wyrms also carried a strange and poignant beauty. Their presence was not without purpose, they were the balance of the world, their destruction tied to creation, as the earth was always in flux. The Wyrms were nature's ancient architects, carving out caves and rivers, shaping the land with every twist of their bodies. There was something awe-inspiring about their slow, unstoppable power, as though they were a force of nature that humans could never hope to conquer, only respect. These legends didn't just tell of creatures, they told of the way people saw the world around them, the deep, mysterious forces that lay beneath the surface of everyday life. The Wyrm's place in these myths was not just as a monster to be defeated, but as a part of the landscape, a reminder that for every hero who sought to conquer, there was something much greater that could not be controlled. There were no simple victories, no easy battles, because nature itself was indifferent to human struggle. In the end, the Wyrms of Scandinavian and British legends were not just creatures to be feared, they were forces to be respected. In their coils, they carried the weight of the earth itself, the slow passage of time, and the truth that some things, no matter how much we desire to tame them, will always remain beyond our reach. The earth trembled beneath them, a low, rumbling growl that echoed through the mountains, as though the very ground itself was alive. A massive form unfurled from the shadows, its body coiled and serpentine, twisting around trees like the ancient serpent of the world. Its wings, great and leathery, stretched wide, casting a shadow that darkened the sky. But was it a dragon? Or something else? Could it be a Wyrm, a wyvern, another kind of beast with its own unique power and form? The creatures of myth, creatures of legend, these beings that so often blend into one another in the stories passed from generation to generation, seem as though they are separate and distinct. Yet, if you listen closely, if you trace their origins through the mists of time, you might find that they are all connected. They are the evolution of something far greater than a single creature, each one a branch on the tree of Dragonkind. But where do they begin, and where do they diverge? The lines are often blurry, as though the wind itself has blurred their true shapes over time. Wyrms, wyverns, and dragons, each with its own distinct form, share a common thread that ties them together. They are the products of human imagination, shaped by our fears, hopes, and understanding of the world. And as you follow the trail from one to the next, you can almost feel the pulse of the earth beneath your feet, an ancient rhythm that has been carried across centuries. The evolution of Dragonkind is not a simple story, but one of growth, change, and transformation. The Wyrms, for example, have always been creatures of the earth, great, slithering serpents that coil around the roots of the world itself. They have no wings, no fire-breathing mouths, no regal stature. Instead, they move through the earth, their massive bodies snaking through caves and forests, their presence felt in every crevice of the land. To see them is to be reminded of the raw power of the earth, a reminder that the land itself is a living, breathing entity. The Wyrm's power does not come from above, but from the very heart of the world. But something changed over time, something that transformed these earthbound creatures into something even more powerful. The Wyverns, creatures that sprouted wings and took to the skies, became the natural successors to the Wyrms. These creatures still shared many of the Wyrms' characteristics, the same sinuous bodies, the same predatory instincts, but now they had a new weapon: flight. They could soar through the sky, their wings beating with the wind, their sharp claws and venomous tails ready to strike at anything that dared to challenge them. There is a story, one told in hushed tones around crackling fires, of a time when the first wyverns appeared in the world. They were said to have risen from the ancient waters, creatures of both sky and earth, born from the chaotic winds that swept across the land. They were no longer confined to the earth's deep caverns. They could fly, tearing through the sky like streaks of lightning. Their bodies, once bound to the land, were now free to explore the vast heavens above, and in their wake, they left a trail of awe and terror. But then, there was the dragon, the culmination of all the Wyrm and Wyverns' potential. Dragons were born from the combination of these creatures' strengths, from the Wyrm's connection to the earth and the Wyverns' mastery of the skies. Dragons were beings of immense power, able to soar across the heavens and crawl deep into the earth. They had wings to carry them to the highest mountains, but their claws could tear through the very fabric of the ground. And their breath, oh, their breath, was not just fire, but a force capable of shaping entire landscapes. You could see how it happened, how one creature begot another, and another, all forming the complex, interconnected tree of Dragonkind. The Wyrms gave birth to the Wyverns, their bodies twisting and stretching into new forms. The Wyverns, in turn, gave birth to the dragons, creatures that took the best of both worlds. From the Wyrms' earthbound power to the Wyverns' ability to rule the sky, the dragons emerged as kings of all creatures, rulers of both the land and the air. The thing is, these creatures were never simply born of nature, they were born of human need, too. Each change, each evolution, came about because we needed them to be more. When we needed something to terrify us, the Wyrm was born. When we needed a creature to strike from the skies, the Wyvern rose. And when we needed a god, a force of destruction and creation, the dragon took shape. But even the dragons were not perfect, not immune to change. Their power, for all its glory, was often used to symbolize the dangers of unchecked greed and pride. They were not just creatures of might and majesty, but allegories for our own flaws. The Wyrm, the Wyvern, and the dragon, their forms may have changed, but they carried with them the same fears and desires. They evolved to reflect our own constant struggle between the earth and the sky, between the forces we can control and the ones we can't. Still, there's something humbling about the way these creatures live on in our imaginations, each of them a part of a long, twisting story of transformation. The Wyrms gave way to the Wyverns, and the Wyverns gave rise to the dragons, but each form carried within it the essence of the others. And maybe that's what makes them so enduring, so unshakable, their connection to each other, to the ever-changing world of myth. So when you stand beneath a sky torn by thunder, when the wind howls and the earth trembles, know this: the legacy of the Wyrm, the Wyvern, and the dragon is not just one of power and terror. It is a reminder of our own place in the world, a world in constant flux, where we are forever reaching toward the heavens while being tethered to the earth beneath our feet. The evolutionary tree of Dragonkind is not just a tale of beasts, it is the tale of us all. In the distant corners of the world, across deserts, mountains, and forests, the shape of a dragon changes. In one place, it slithers like a serpent, eyes burning with ancient wisdom. In another, it towers on legs thick as tree trunks, its wings vast enough to blot out the sun. The roar of one dragon might shake the heavens, while another may simply glide silently through the mist, as if the world itself bends to its will. Why? Why do these creatures, so universally feared and revered, take on such different forms, depending on where and by whom they are seen? There's something deeply personal, even intimate, about the dragons that appear in every culture's mythology. The dragons aren't just beasts. They are reflections, distorted, sometimes terrifying, but undeniably human reflections of what people need, fear, and hope for. The stories of these great creatures, as varied as the lands they inhabit, reveal one unshakable truth: dragons are shaped by culture itself. In ancient China, the dragon was a symbol of imperial power, of nobility, and divine authority. It was not the terror of the night, nor the destroyer of villages, but rather the protector of peace, the ruler of rivers, and the symbol of fertility and good fortune. The Chinese dragon was seen as a benefactor, bestowing wisdom and prosperity upon those it favored. It had no wings, for it didn't need them. The dragon's power came from within, from the waters and the skies that it could command. To see a dragon in China was to know that the emperor, too, was divinely chosen, a bridge between the heavens and the earth. The dragon didn't threaten, it embraced. It was a sign of hope, a symbol that no matter how hard life might get, there was always something greater out there guiding the way. Contrast this with the fire-breathing, menacing dragons of Europe. In the stories of knights and chivalry, the dragon was a creature of destruction, lurking in the dark corners of the world, waiting to wreak havoc. The dragon was not a benevolent force, but a symbol of chaos, of greed, and of destruction. Knights had to slay these beasts, not to claim their riches, but to protect the innocent and restore order. Here, the dragon was a villain, a stark reminder of the darker aspects of humanity, our fears of the unknown, our greed, and our desire for power. And yet, across the vast distance of cultures, these dragons were still connected by the same elemental essence. They breathed fire. They controlled the skies. They were both destroyers and creators. But the way they were understood, the way people projected their values, their struggles, their dreams onto these mythical creatures, was what made them so different. Consider the Native American dragon-like creatures, many of which lived in water or beneath the earth, waiting for the right moment to emerge. These dragons were not just feared, they were respected as guardians of nature. Water, so essential to life, was sacred. And these dragons, tied to the life-giving force of rivers, lakes, and oceans, were symbols of the balance of nature itself. The shape of the dragon in Native American culture was often serpentine, flowing with the natural world, not imposing on it, but being part of it. In these cultures, the dragons were as much a part of the natural world as the winds and the trees, part of the cycle of life that connected all things. Here, dragons weren't just mythological, they were elemental, and their significance was woven into the fabric of the world itself. In Africa, too, dragons took on a vastly different shape, one molded by the needs and struggles of the people. Here, the dragons were often seen as protectors, wise creatures guarding the entrances to sacred places, preventing those who were unworthy from entering. They were not creatures of fantasy, but real entities that embodied the challenges of survival, the need for strength, and the power of wisdom. The African dragon wasn't there to teach lessons of conquest, but to remind people of the importance of guarding what is sacred, of living in harmony with the land and each other. The way dragons appear in African cultures speaks to a deeper understanding of the world, a world that isn't just filled with good and evil, but with balance, respect, and reverence. Then there are the dragons of the Middle East, whose forms intertwine with the ancient belief in good versus evil, light versus dark. Here, dragons are often symbols of trials and tribulations, not just against otherworldly forces, but against the forces within. To defeat the dragon is to face oneself, to conquer the internal struggles that tear us apart. These dragons are not just beasts to be slain, they are lessons in personal growth and spiritual journey. They are warnings that the greatest battles are the ones fought within, that to slay a dragon is to confront the parts of ourselves that we fear the most. What is clear in all of this is that dragons are more than just mythical creatures. They are mirrors, reflecting the inner workings of the cultures that create them. The dragon of China is shaped by a culture that values peace, harmony, and wisdom. The dragons of Europe are born from a society that understands the need for defense, for heroes, for the battle between good and evil. The African dragons are protectors, guarding sacred spaces in a culture that understands the importance of respect and balance. The dragons of the Middle East speak of the battle within, a journey toward understanding the self. And even beyond these, there are countless other dragons, each shaped by the land, the people, and the stories they tell. The creature that terrorizes the villages of one culture is the protector of the rivers in another. The dragon that embodies pride and destruction in one myth is a symbol of healing and rebirth in another. No two dragons are the same, and yet they are all connected, not just by their mythic forms, but by the needs, desires, and fears of the cultures that created them. In every line, every curve of their bodies, every scale, every flame, dragons are shaped by the very human need to understand the world. They are born from the struggle for control, for peace, for survival, for understanding. And as long as people continue to dream, to hope, and to fear, dragons will continue to take new forms, each one reflecting a new generation, a new culture, and a new chapter in the story of humanity itself. In the flickering light of a faraway cave, a pair of glowing eyes pierces through the darkness. The faint rustling of scales whispers as the ground trembles with each massive step. And there, amidst the shadows, lies the dragon's hoard. Piles of gold, shimmering jewels, and ancient treasures lie scattered across the stone floor, a wealth beyond imagination. Yet, it is not just the sheer value of these treasures that makes the sight so haunting, it is the way the dragon guards them. It is the obsessive, fierce way it clutches the riches, as though they are the very essence of its existence. Gold, gems, jewels. Why is it that these treasures, so beloved by humanity, are so closely tied to the creatures of legend? Why do dragons, and every culture and myth, seem to hoard them with such dangerous intensity? For the dragon, treasure is not just a pile of glittering things. It is the physical embodiment of everything it craves. Power, control, a sense of permanence. Gold, with its eternal shine, promises an unbroken legacy, untouched by time or decay. The jewels, with their countless facets, mirror the many faces of a dragon's soul, sharp, beautiful, and unyielding. In many myths, the treasure is not just wealth, it is the dragon's heart. Its purpose. Its meaning. And yet, there is something deeply unsettling about this obsession. Why do dragons, in so many legends, gather treasures in such a reckless way? Why do they guard these hoards with such ferocity, burning villages and killing knights, when the riches could be given away or shared? It is as if the treasure represents more than just wealth. Perhaps it symbolizes something far darker. Perhaps it represents the dragon's own inner demons, its own fears, and desires that it cannot escape. To hoard treasure is to hoard time. It is to defy death itself. Gold may be shiny, but it does not age. It does not fade. It does not die. For the dragon, this is more than just wealth, it is immortality. To clutch these treasures is to clutch at something beyond life, to believe that, somehow, these riches will give the dragon control over time itself. But time is not so easily conquered. Even the mightiest dragon cannot escape the inevitable. And so it keeps hoarding, day after day, night after night, desperate for a glimpse of permanence in a world that is, by nature, fleeting. The people who come to steal the treasure, too, are caught in the same trap. The knights, the adventurers, the thieves, all of them are drawn to the dragon's hoard not just by greed, but by something more insidious. They are chasing a dream. The promise that wealth will bring them everything they desire: power, freedom, status, love. They believe that by obtaining the treasure, they will become something more than they are, something better. But what they fail to realize is that they are chasing a shadow, a mirage. The treasure does not grant happiness, nor does it bring fulfillment. The dragon, too, knows this deep down. It is why it guards the riches so fiercely. It has seen the truth that the adventurer cannot. Treasure is a hollow thing. It cannot fill the void. Perhaps, in this way, the dragon and the treasure are one. Both are bound by a hunger that can never truly be sated. The dragon hoards the treasure not out of sheer greed, but out of desperation, a desperate need to control something, to hold on to something when everything else seems out of reach. And the humans, in turn, are driven to take it, to possess it, because they, too, are lost in their search for meaning. The dragon, guarding its hoard, symbolizes a dark truth that the pursuit of wealth, of power, of immortality, will never fill the emptiness inside. Yet, as much as the horde represents the dragon's obsession with immortality, it also reflects the human condition. Every person has a horde, a desire, a dream, a longing they keep close, too close, never willing to share, always guarding it as though it is the key to their happiness. Whether it is a career, a relationship, a belief, or something far more personal, there is a horde inside all of us. And like the dragon, we often cling to it, hoping that it will bring us meaning, when in truth, it only serves to weigh us down. The horde becomes a prison, a golden cage that we lock ourselves in, thinking that the more we possess, the more we will be free. But in the end, we find ourselves shackled, bound by our own desires. The temptation of treasure is a dangerous thing. It lures us, pulls us in, promising everything we ever wanted, and yet, it delivers nothing. Those who try to steal the dragon's hoard often meet a terrible end. But in many ways, they are no different from the dragon itself. They are both victims of the same desire, the same temptation. The treasure promises escape, but it only leads to ruin. The more we chase after it, the more we become like the dragon, clutching at something we cannot hold, desperately trying to fill a void that cannot be filled. In a way, the dragon's hoard is a reflection of our deepest fears and desires. It speaks to our own struggles, our own ambitions. It reminds us that the things we seek most desperately are often the things that will destroy us. We seek wealth, power, love, recognition, things that glitter, things that shine. But we must ask ourselves, when we finally reach the hoard, will we be satisfied? Or will we simply find ourselves guarding a pile of treasure that is, in the end, nothing but a hollow shell? The dragon watches, its eyes glowing in the dark, as the treasure piles up higher and higher, like a monument to its own despair. It is a prisoner of its own desires, just as we all are. And perhaps that is the saddest part of all, the treasure is not the prize. The real prize is freedom. The freedom to let go. The freedom to stop hoarding and start living. The hero's sword gleams in the fiery light of the dying day. His breath comes in ragged gasps, every step forward a battle against the weight of fate. The dragon lies in wait, coiled and terrible, its eyes glowing with an ancient rage. Each movement of its massive wings sends gusts of wind crashing against the trees, and the ground trembles under its fury. This is the moment every warrior has dreamed of, but as the hero stands there, facing the creature of legend, he knows the truth. This is more than just a battle. This is the fight for the very soul of humanity. For as long as there have been dragons, there have been dragon slayers. They are the timeless figures, heroes woven into the fabric of myth and legend, whose stories are told with reverence, awe, and fear. These are not just men and women who fight monsters, they are the ones who confront the very heart of darkness, who stand against something ancient and primal, far beyond anything mortal. They are the brave souls who take up the mantle of destiny, wielding their swords against beasts that represent more than just physical terror. They are fighting against the forces that threaten to consume everything. The story of dragon slayers is as old as myth itself. From the ancient halls of Beowulf, where the hero battles the ferocious dragon in his final act of glory, to the tale of St. George, whose courage stands as an eternal symbol of virtue, dragon slayers have always stood at the crossroads between humanity's light and the darkness that seeks to swallow it. They are the ones who challenge the dragon, the symbol of chaos and destruction. But in these stories, the dragons are never just mindless beasts, they are representations of something far greater, something that no hero could truly defeat without confronting a part of themselves. In Beowulf, the hero's victory over Grendel is the beginning of his path. The dragon that he faces in the final act is not just a monster, it is a reflection of his own journey. This dragon, an embodiment of greed and vengeance, threatens to destroy everything Beowulf has fought for. As he faces it, he knows he must do what no man has done before, to confront death itself, to take on the darkness that is not just outside but within. The hero's struggle is a reflection of our own battles, those internal dragons that we fight every day, the fear, the doubt, the forces within that threaten to drag us into despair. The dragon is not merely an opponent. It is a force that calls for sacrifice. And then there is St. George, the knight whose courage has been immortalized in legends and tales across centuries. St. George's battle with the dragon has become the archetype of all dragon-slaying myths, and in his fight, the dragon represents the deepest evil that lurks in the world. It is an allegory for sin, for temptation, and for the struggle between light and darkness. As he stands before the creature, he does not just fight with a sword, he fights with his faith, his honor, his very soul. The dragon in this story is the embodiment of everything that threatens to pull mankind from grace. But St. George, armed with conviction, does not falter. He defeats the beast not with violence alone, but with the strength of his belief in good. The dragon falls, but in its wake is the reminder that evil is not vanquished forever. It returns again and again, just as we must continue to rise, again and again, to face the dragons that seek to undo us. These stories have traveled across generations, and with each telling, they morph and change, but the heart of the myth remains the same. The Dragon Slayer is not just a figure of strength or bravery. They are an archetype of every person who faces their own darkness, their own struggles, their own monsters. We are all dragon slayers in our own way. Every time we fight against temptation, every time we battle our fears, we are wielding our swords against the dragons that would destroy us. The Dragon Slayer represents the part of us that refuses to surrender to the darkness, the part that refuses to let fear and doubt win. But there is another layer to these myths, one that speaks to the true cost of being a hero. The Dragon Slayer is often depicted as someone who must pay a price for their victory. In Beowulf, the hero's final battle with the dragon is not just the culmination of his journey, it is his downfall. His victory over the beast is bittersweet, as it leads to his death. This is a truth that no one wants to face. The fight against darkness comes at a cost. The hero's sacrifice is not just an external one. It is an internal one, a surrender of something that can never be reclaimed. The Dragon Slayer knows that there is no victory without sacrifice. Every sword swung against the dragon is a step toward a personal transformation. For the hero, the dragon becomes a symbol not just of evil but of the pain and struggle they carry within themselves. And this is the core of the hero's journey, the act of confronting something so monstrous, so terrifying, that it forces the hero to evolve, to change, to become something else entirely. The dragon is a mirror. Every slash of the sword, every moment of struggle, reveals something about the hero, something that must be faced, something that must be conquered. In these myths, the Dragon Slayer is more than just a victor. They are a symbol of what it means to fight for something greater than oneself. The dragons they face are not merely enemies to be destroyed, they are challenges to be overcome, lessons to be learned. The Dragon Slayer learns to face the darkness, not just outside, but within, and to do so with courage, even when the cost is unimaginable. When the hero slays the dragon, they do not just defeat a creature. They defeat fear itself. They defeat the doubts and the shadows that threaten to overwhelm them. They become something greater, something more. The dragon is not just a test of strength, it is a test of the human spirit. The Dragon Slayer proves, time and again, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the strength to face it head-on, to fight against the darkness, and to never stop. Every dragon-slaying myth is a reminder of the eternal challenge we all face, the battle between light and darkness, hope and despair, life and death. And in the end, it is not the dragon that is slain, it is the fears that we must conquer within ourselves. The sun blazes down on the rugged, desolate terrain of a remote Indonesian island. Beneath its relentless heat, something stirs, a lumbering figure, scales glinting faintly in the harsh light. It moves with a primal power, muscles rippling beneath its rough hide. Its long, sinuous tongue flickers out, tasting the air. A silent predator, ancient and unyielding, the Komodo dragon commands the land as if time itself has forgotten to change its dominion. Watching this creature, it's easy to see why it has become a symbol of dragons. Its presence feels like a piece of myth stepping into reality. The Komodo dragon is no mere lizard. Growing up to 10 feet long and weighing over 150 pounds, it moves with the deliberate grace of a king surveying its kingdom. Its thick, armored skin and sharp claws seem like relics of a prehistoric era. Its saliva, a lethal cocktail of bacteria and venom, carries death for those unfortunate enough to cross its path. It stalks its prey with a patient ferocity that sends shivers down the spine, as though it holds a secret shared by the beasts of legend. For centuries, the locals whispered stories about this creature. They spoke of a monstrous predator with an unquenchable hunger, a shadow that haunted the jungles. To them, the Komodo dragon wasn't just a lizard, it was a living, breathing incarnation of the mythical dragons that once ruled the skies and seas of folklore. Its massive size and menacing features blurred the line between reality and myth, planting the seeds of stories that would spread far beyond the islands. But the Komodo dragon isn't the only creature that has breathed life into the dragon myths. Across the world, nature has given rise to animals so extraordinary that they seem to belong to another realm entirely. In the vast expanse of Australia, the frilled-neck lizard defends itself by unfurling a vibrant, spiked frill around its neck, a sudden and dramatic display that recalls the fiery majesty of a dragon's crest. Its posture, standing tall on its hind legs, mirrors the fearsome stance of creatures found in ancient carvings and paintings. In the depths of the oceans, the oarfish glides silently, its elongated body shimmering with an ethereal light. Stretching up to 36 feet long, it is both otherworldly and majestic, its undulating motion conjuring images of sea serpents that once terrorized the dreams of sailors. And deep in the jungles of South America, the basilisk lizard dances across the surface of rivers as if it has mastered the elements themselves. Known as the Jesus lizard for its ability to run on water, it carries the same sense of awe that fuels tales of dragons defying nature's laws. Even the crocodile, ancient, armored, and unrelenting, has played a role in shaping dragon myths. Its scaly hide and fearsome teeth seem like echoes of something older, something forgotten but remembered in whispers and stories. The Nile crocodile, revered and feared in equal measure by ancient Egyptians, was often associated with Sobek, a god of power and protection. Sobek's crocodilian features fused divine strength with the raw, untamed ferocity of a predator, a parallel to the dragon's dual role as protector and destroyer. Real-world creatures didn't just inspire the shapes of dragons, they gave rise to the emotions these myths evoke. A serpent's sudden strike, a bird of prey soaring flight, the overwhelming size of a whale, each encounter was a brush with nature's magnificence and its terror. People saw dragons and the creatures around them because they needed a way to explain the awe and fear that these animals inspired. They turned to stories to fill the gaps, to make sense of the extraordinary. There is another layer to this, though, one that blurs the boundary between real and imagined. Fossils unearthed from the earth, bones too large to belong to anything familiar, spurred the human imagination to new heights. Long before paleontology was a science, early civilizations stumbled upon the remains of creatures like the ichthyosaur or the pterosaur, their fossilized skeletons resembling something out of a dream. To them, these weren't the remnants of extinct species, they were evidence of dragons, proof that these legendary creatures had once roamed the earth. In China, where dragons are revered as symbols of wisdom, power, and luck, dinosaur fossils discovered in the Gobi Desert were often interpreted as the remains of these divine beings. The intricate, curling shapes of the bones matched the flowing, serpentine dragons depicted in art and scripture. Each fossil was not just a scientific curiosity but a sacred relic, a tangible link to the celestial dragons of lore. As cultures connected through trade and conquest, stories mingled and evolved. European travelers hearing of the mighty Komodo dragon or the crocodiles of the Nile wove these real creatures into their tales. The Chinese dragon, already an icon of strength and vitality, gained new layers of ferocity and danger as Western interpretations introduced fiery breath and towering wings. These shared stories, shaped by encounters with real animals, created a tapestry of myths that was both universal and unique. Yet, for all the inspiration drawn from real creatures, dragons became more than the sum of their parts. The Komodo dragon's predatory grace, the oarfish's ghostly beauty, the crocodile's armored dominance, all of these elements combined to create a creature that transcended reality. The dragon became a vessel for humanity's dreams and fears, a way to give form to the forces we could neither conquer nor fully understand. Standing face to face with a Komodo dragon, feeling the weight of its gaze, it is easy to understand how the myth took shape. There is something timeless in its movements, something that reaches back to the dawn of storytelling itself. It is a reminder that the line between myth and reality is thinner than we often realize. Real creatures can inspire the wildest flights of fantasy, and those fantasies, in turn, can shape the way we see the natural world. In the Komodo dragon's deliberate steps, in the shimmering length of the oarfish, in the crocodile's silent glide through murky waters, we find traces of the dragons that have haunted and inspired us for centuries. They are real, and they are not. They are beasts of flesh and blood, and they are something more. The wind howled across the barren expanse of a forgotten desert. A weathered traveler crouched low, brushing away sand with trembling hands. What emerged was not the stone he expected, nor a relic of his people's craft. It was something older, something that should not have been. Jagged ribs jutted from the ground like the spines of a great beast. A jaw, gaping and full of wicked, broken teeth, stared back at him, and in that moment, time itself seemed to twist. What monstrous thing had died here, and what tales had it left behind in the earth? Long before science named them dinosaurs, these fossilized bones whispered stories to the first humans who stumbled upon them. They hinted at creatures so immense, so terrifying, that they defied reason. Skulls as large as a man's body, claws that could rip apart the strongest armor, and tails so powerful they could shatter stone. People who uncovered these remains didn't see extinct animals, they saw proof of creatures that must still haunt the shadows of the world. In the vast plains of Mongolia, the wind carries tales of dragons passed down through generations. Long ago, nomads unearthed bones unlike any they had seen before, fragments of great teeth, curved and sharp vertebrae so massive they seemed built for giants. These bones weren't discarded. They were revered. The nomads believed these remains belonged to winged serpents, fierce guardians of the land, and their legends grew teeth and claws with every retelling. In Europe, the dragon was a symbol of chaos and power, and the discovery of fossilized remains reinforced its hold on the imagination. Shepherds climbing rocky hillsides stumbled upon enormous skulls, each lined with serrated teeth that could easily have belonged to the dragons of their ancestors' tales. In the cliffs of Dorset, England, strange, twisting fossils appeared in the limestone. They were ammonites, coiled shells from prehistoric oceans, but to the people of the time, they were the petrified remains of dragons' tongues. Villagers carried them as charms, convinced they held the power of the mythical beasts that had left them behind. Across the seas in China, farmers tilling the soil often unearthed massive bones. These were labeled as dragon bones and were ground into powder to be used in medicine. To them, the dragon wasn't a monster, it was a benevolent force, a symbol of strength and vitality. Holding a piece of its remains was akin to holding the very essence of life itself. The bones became more than relics, they became vessels of hope, power, and connection to something greater. It wasn't just the shape of the fossils that fueled these stories, it was their location. In deserts, mountains, and caves, where the land itself seemed harsh and untamed, these relics felt like remnants of a time when the world was ruled by chaos. Finding such bones in remote, unforgiving places only confirmed that these beasts had once roamed freely, unchallenged by humanity. Even when science began to name these fossils, the myths didn't die. In fact, they grew. The concept of the dinosaur, these terrible lizards of the ancient world, seemed to echo the dragon myths so perfectly that people wondered if they were one and the same. Paleontologists uncovered skeletons of creatures like the Tyrannosaurus rex, with its fearsome jaws and towering presence, or the Stegosaurus, its back lined with plates that could easily have been mistaken for armor. Each discovery seemed to validate the idea that dragons were not just figments of imagination, but echoes of something real. The bones of pterosaurs, ancient flying reptiles, inspired particular awe. With wingspans reaching over 30 feet, these creatures would have cast massive shadows as they soared across prehistoric skies. To early humans, finding such remains could only mean one thing: the dragons of the heavens had fallen to earth. Their wings had once darkened the sun, their cries had once echoed across valleys, and their fiery breath had once scorched the land. How else could one explain such a creature? But it wasn't just their appearance that struck fear and wonder into the hearts of those who found them, it was the scale of their existence. A single femur, taller than the tallest man, suggested a world where humans were insignificant. These fossils hinted at a time when the earth belonged to creatures far greater, far older, and far more dangerous. They challenged the idea of human dominance, forcing those who uncovered them to confront a terrifying possibility that the monsters of their nightmares had once been real. For many, these fossils became warnings. In Scandinavian legends, tales of serpentine Wyrms slithering through dark forests gained new weight when paired with the discovery of long, winding skeletons. In British folklore, the story of the lantern worm, a venomous beast that terrorized villages, seemed all too plausible when the remains of prehistoric marine reptiles emerged from the cliffs of Whitby. These bones became proof that dragons had walked, or swam, the earth and might still linger in its depths. Yet, there was something else in these discoveries, something that went beyond fear. There was wonder. The bones spoke of a world filled with creatures so magnificent, so beyond the ordinary, that they stretched the boundaries of imagination. They were a reminder of life's endless possibilities, of the raw beauty that had shaped the earth long before humanity. The fossils became not just relics of destruction, but symbols of resilience, of a time when the earth thrived in ways we could barely comprehend. Even now, standing before the massive skeleton of a dinosaur in a museum, it's impossible not to feel the pull of these ancient myths. The bones seem alive, as if they're waiting for the right moment to shake off the dust of centuries and rise again. Children gaze up at the towering frames, wide-eyed with the same mix of fear and awe that their ancestors must have felt. For in these bones lies a story of creatures that ruled the land and skies, of battles fought and legends born, of a world where dragons, in all their forms, were real. The storm rolled in quickly, dark clouds smothering the horizon, and the air grew thick with a sense of unease. Far out on the ocean, a lone ship rocked on the waves. Its crew, hardened men who had weathered countless storms, looked nervously toward the shifting waters. The sea, once so familiar, had become an unknown, a place of dread. A shadow moved beneath the surface, a ripple that seemed to stretch for miles, its purpose uncertain but its presence undeniable. Was it a trick of the light? Or had the old stories of sea serpents, creatures that lurked in the deep and only revealed themselves to those who dared venture too far, come to life? Throughout history, legends have always spoken of creatures that roam the oceans and skies, unseen yet deeply felt. Some call them dragons. Others, cryptids. The distinction doesn't matter much in the end. What matters is that these creatures, these beasts of the unknown, continue to capture our imaginations. They haunt the fringes of reality, flickering in the shadows just out of reach. Even today, in an age of discovery and science, there are those who believe that dragons, in some form or another, still exist. In the waters off the coast of Norway, fishermen tell stories of the kraken, a beast so vast that it could swallow a ship whole. Some say it is a sea serpent, its long, twisting body capable of vanishing into the depths in a single motion, only to rise again when least expected. The sailors swear they've seen its massive tentacles reach up from the ocean's surface, pulling unsuspecting vessels into the churning water. But what if it isn't just the kraken? What if it is something older, something more ancient, a creature that mirrors the sea serpents of old, creatures that the Vikings once feared and revered as dragons? Then there's the story of the Loch Ness Monster, or Nessie, whose serpentine form has slithered its way into the hearts of millions. For years, people have claimed to see its dark shape gliding through the waters of Loch Ness in Scotland, its long neck rising above the surface like a serpent of legend. Some have dismissed it as nothing more than shadows or the play of light. Yet there are those who refuse to let go of the belief that Nessie is a living creature, a remnant of a time when such beasts ruled the waters. Was it a dragon, a prehistoric creature long thought extinct, or simply a cryptid whose legend persists, refusing to be forgotten? The fascination with these creatures continues to grow, and it's not just confined to the oceans. On the mountains of the world, where the air is thin and the land is rugged, stories of dragons and dragon-like creatures persist. In the Himalayas, the tale of the Yeti has become entwined with the dragon myths of Asia. This great, elusive beast, half man, half monster, has the power to move between worlds, just as dragons are said to. The people who live in these remote regions tell stories of how they've glimpsed the Yeti, its massive form disappearing into the shadows of the mountains, as if it were part of the earth itself. Was it a creature born of the earth, like the dragon, or was it a symbol of something darker, something older? In the jungles of South America, indigenous peoples whisper of a creature called the Amaru. Described as a giant serpent with wings, it is said to dwell in the highest parts of the Andes, a guardian of the earth. The Amaru is more than just a creature, it is a symbol, a link between the heavens and the earth. Its wings are said to create winds that change the course of rivers, and its roar can shake the very foundation of the mountains. It is as if the Amaru is a dragon that has transcended its physical form, existing as both a legend and a living entity, haunting the remote corners of the world. What connects these cryptids, the Kraken, the Loch Ness Monster, the Yeti, the Amaru? They are not just tales of fear and awe, they are echoes of a time when dragons were real, when they roamed freely and terrorized those who crossed their paths. They are creatures that refuse to fade into myth. No matter how much science pushes forward, these stories persist. People continue to report strange sightings, inexplicable sounds, and terrifying experiences that seem to echo the ancient myths. The world of cryptozoology, where creatures like Bigfoot, the Chupacabra, and the Mokumbembe lurk, has become a modern extension of these old stories. Perhaps it is our need to believe in the impossible that keeps these creatures alive in our hearts. Perhaps it is the idea that somewhere, hidden in the vast wilderness or beneath the waves, there are dragons still waiting to be found. Their very existence seems to challenge the boundaries of reason. They are the last remnants of a time when the earth was ruled by forces beyond our understanding, and they continue to haunt our dreams, stirring something deep within us. Every so often, someone captures a photograph, grainy, unclear, but it's enough to ignite the spark of belief again. A shadow in the water, a ripple across a mountain ridge, a glimpse of something too large, too strange to be explained away. The internet explodes with theories, debates, and hopes. Could it be real? Could there really be a dragon out there, hiding in the vast, unexplored places of the world? And with each new claim, the myth of the dragon grows stronger, pushing its way further into the realm of possibility. In the end, perhaps these creatures live on because they serve a deeper purpose. They are more than just monsters, they are symbols. They are reminders of the unknown, of the mysteries that lie just beyond our reach. In a world that constantly seeks to explain and categorize everything, these cryptids stand as defiant whispers that some things can never be fully understood. They remind us that, no matter how much we know, there is always something out there, something old, something powerful, that refuses to be tamed, and that, perhaps, is what makes them so profoundly human. There was a time when dragons lived only in the dusty pages of forgotten myths, their fire-breathing, treasure-hoarding tales slipping through the cracks of history. The world had moved on, seeking answers in science and reason, casting aside the beasts of legend as nothing more than stories. But then, like the first stirrings of dawn over a long, dark night, a new light shone, a spark of something magical that would rekindle the fires of old, bringing the dragon back to life. It began with a quiet voice. The voice of a man who had spent his life in the world of words, breathing life into the very myths that time had tried to swallow. J.R.R. Tolkien, a name now synonymous with dragons, took the creatures of old and breathed new life into them, not just as beasts to be feared, but as beings of great depth, power, and mystery. His dragons were more than simple monsters, they were complex, ancient, and full of untold stories. In the pages of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, the dragon Smaug was not just a creature guarding a mountain of gold, he was a symbol of greed, of isolation, and of the destructive power of unchecked desire. Tolkien's dragon was a creature whose wings could stir not only the wind but the hearts of men. Smaug was not the only dragon to rise in the pages of Tolkien's world. The very landscape of Middle-earth was filled with whispers of other dragonkind, ancient beings, their fire eternal, their hearts dark with ancient knowledge. But the tale of Smaug, with his cunning mind and heart full of pride, changed everything. No longer were dragons simply mythological creatures to be slain. They became metaphors, powerful forces of nature, embodying the very essence of human flaws and aspirations. As Tolkien's dragons soared across the skies of literary imagination, they left behind a trail of fire and wonder that would ignite the works of countless others. Writers who had grown up hearing the ancient stories of dragons now had the chance to reshape them, to mold them into creatures that would fit into the new world of fantasy. And so, one by one, new dragons began to appear. They were no longer just the fearsome beasts of old, they were characters, with personalities, motives, and fates. They became central to the very heart of fantasy literature, the fire that fueled the imagination. And McCaffrey's dragons, from the Dragon Riders of Pern's series, were birthed from the stars themselves, alien creatures who shared an unbreakable bond with their human riders. These dragons, with their shimmering scales and telepathic powers, were not just creatures of myth, but companions, protectors, and friends. They bridged the gap between worlds, one foot in the earth and the other in the stars, and in doing so, they rewrote the way we saw dragons forever. They were no longer creatures of simple destruction, they became part of a living, breathing world, tied to the very fabric of life itself. In the World of Aragon by Christopher Paolini, dragons returned to the land, but this time as ancient beings with a rich and sorrowful past. The bond between dragon and rider was one of deep, almost magical symbiosis. Here, dragons were not simply symbols of evil or greed. They were creatures of wisdom, burdened by centuries of history, standing as living reminders of what had been lost and what could still be regained. The dragons of Aragon were proud, noble creatures who had the power to shape the world, but they also carried the weight of history on their wings. But the rebirth of the dragon was not confined to literature alone. The world of film and television, too, embraced these mythical beasts with open arms. From the soaring skies of Game of Thrones to the fire-breathing terror of How to Train Your Dragon, dragons began to appear not only in the pages of books but on the silver screen, their enormous wings casting shadows over entire cities. They were no longer confined to the role of villains. They were protectors, mentors, companions, and even friends. They were shown as creatures that could be understood, tamed, and loved. The ancient rift between human and dragon began to close, and the bond between them became one of mutual respect. The dragon had evolved. No longer were they simply creatures of destruction, relegated to fairy tales where they could only be slain by a brave knight. They were no longer just guardians of treasure hoards. The new dragon was multifaceted, layered with the complexities of the human condition. They symbolized our greatest fears and our deepest desires. They were both a reflection of ourselves and a force of nature beyond our understanding. But what was it that made the dragon so enduring, so central to our collective consciousness? It was their fire, their strength, their sheer power. The dragon represented everything that was untamable, unshakable, and wild. It was the force of nature itself, the very breath of life and death. But it was also something more, it was a mirror. In the dragon, we could see our own desires, our own fears, our own potential for greatness and for ruin. The modern world was changing, but the dragon remained a constant, a reminder of the mysteries of the universe, of the things that could never be fully understood or tamed. And so, in a world of technology and progress, we still turn to these ancient creatures for comfort, for awe, for a sense of something larger than ourselves. We look to them for the magic we had lost and the adventure we craved. From the towering mountains of Middle-earth to the skies of Pern, from the shores of Alagaesia to the icy waters of Westeros, dragons soared once again. They became not just a part of fantasy literature, but the heart of it. They reminded us that there was still magic in the world, that the impossible could be real, and that the stories of old, those tales of fire and wings, still had a place in the world of tomorrow. And so, the dragon continues to fly, its wings a symbol of all that is untold, all that is waiting to be discovered, and all that lies just beyond the reach of our imagination. A storm rages, dark clouds swirling and crackling with electricity. Suddenly, the ground trembles, and from the depths of the sky, a massive figure emerges, a silhouette framed by lightning. Its wings spread wide, blocking out the stars, and with a roar that shakes the very air, it unleashes a stream of fire that lights up the night. It's a dragon, and in this moment, it's not just a beast, it's a force of nature, a living, breathing symbol of raw power. But this dragon isn't confined to ancient myth or the pages of fantasy novels. It's here, in front of our eyes, on the silver screen, its fiery breath scorching the world around it. From the very first moment dragons made their way into film, they ignited something deep inside us: fear, wonder, awe. The depiction of dragons in film and television has evolved over the years, but their ability to captivate and stir the imagination has never faltered. Whether they're towering over vast cities or quietly nestled in a mountain cave, these dragons are more than just mythical creatures. They are embodiments of our deepest desires, fears, and dreams. One of the most iconic portrayals of a dragon in film comes from the 1933 classic King Kong. While not a dragon in the traditional sense, the giant reptilian creatures Kong battles on Skull Island were early cinematic attempts to bring such legendary beasts to life. Their massive scale and terrifying presence set the stage for future dragon depictions, showing the potential of visual media to bring creatures of myth to life in ways books and stories alone could not. Then came The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings films, where the dragon Smaug became more than just a villain guarding treasure. Smaug was a creature of complex emotion. His greed and pride made him terrifying, but there was an underlying sadness, a sense of loss in his eyes. The animation and performance captured by Benedict Cumberbatch's voice work breathed life into him in a way that made the audience both fear and sympathize with him. Smaug's endless hoard of treasure wasn't just gold and gems, it was a symbol of his isolation, a reminder of what he had become, a creature of wealth, but also of loneliness and wrath. But dragons aren't always seen as villains, and they've taken on new roles in recent years. How to Train Your Dragon offered us a different view of the winged beasts, an unlikely bond between a young Viking named Hiccup and a dragon named Toothless. In this series, dragons are more than fire-breathing monsters. They are friends, companions, and even protectors. Toothless, with his sleek black scales and wide eyes, was no longer a terrifying beast to be slain but a loyal partner, showing that dragons could symbolize trust, friendship, and growth. The film's portrayal of these creatures added depth and emotional connection, making Toothless one of the most beloved dragons in film history. In Game of Thrones, dragons became a key part of the story's political and emotional landscape. Daenerys Targaryen's dragons weren't just tools of war, they were her family, her children. The visual effects, paired with the powerful emotional arcs of the characters, transformed dragons from mere instruments of destruction into symbols of power, loss, and rebirth. Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion were not only weapons, but representations of Daenerys' growth, her struggles, and her ability to shape the world around her. Their fire-breathing scenes were intense, yes, but the emotional depth with which they were depicted set them apart from traditional portrayals of dragons. But dragons have also taken on unexpected forms. In the animated classic Mulan, the dragon Mushu stands out as one of the most unique portrayals. Small, comic, and more a trickster than a fearsome beast, Mushu defies the traditional dragon roles we are used to. Yet, even in his mischievous ways, he still embodies the strength and courage we often associate with dragons. His fiery spirit, though not in the literal sense, captures the essence of what a dragon represents: bravery, loyalty, and determination. The role of dragons in film isn't just about spectacle, though. The sheer power of a dragon's presence on screen can evoke a wide range of emotions. In Reign of Fire, the world is ravaged by fire-breathing dragons, and the survivors are forced into a brutal fight for survival. The devastation these creatures bring is heartbreaking, not only because of the destruction they cause, but because of the human loss they symbolize. The dragons in this film are more than just monsters, they are agents of a world that has changed forever. They are the embodiment of the consequences of human greed and environmental destruction, a reminder that nature, when enraged, can turn against us. The dragons of Shrek add another layer to their portrayal. Here, the dragon is not a solitary creature, but a loving partner to Donkey, with whom she shares a deep bond. Her transformation from an intimidating, fire-breathing monster to a caring mother with a sense of humor shows that dragons, too, can have soft, relatable sides. The films, with their mix of comedy and heart, prove that dragons don't have to be one-dimensional. They can be complex, layered creatures with personalities as diverse as the people who encounter them. In each of these portrayals, the dragon takes on new forms, but the underlying emotions remain the same. Whether they are symbols of destruction or protection, pride or humility, dragons tap into something primal within us. They represent a force larger than life, something we can never fully tame, but something that continues to fascinate and inspire. From the towering, terrifying creatures of Reign of Fire to the playful, heartwarming moments in Shrek or How to Train Your Dragon, dragons in film have become more than just myth. They are reflections of our inner struggles, our desires, and our fears. Through their fire, their wings, and their scales, they have come to represent the powerful forces that shape our world, forces that we may never understand fully but will forever strive to understand. Whether soaring above the clouds or quietly resting in a cave, dragons in film and television continue to capture our hearts and imaginations, reminding us that some legends never die. There's a moment in How to Train Your Dragon when Hiccup, standing before the beast that was once his enemy, reaches out his hand, offering trust. The dragon, toothless, hesitates. Then, with a soft, tentative motion, he stretches his head toward Hiccup's palm. It's a simple gesture, but in that moment, something shifts. The line between predator and prey, between fear and trust, is erased. It's not just a dragon anymore, it's a companion, a friend. The world of dragons had just changed, and it's a change that resonated with every heart watching. Dragons have always been larger-than-life creatures. They were once the monsters of legends, the ones we feared. They breathed fire, hoarded treasure, and stood between heroes and glory. They were the antagonists, the challenges that only the bravest dared to face. But then something remarkable began to happen. Dragons, once feared and destroyed, started to change. They went from villains to allies, from terror to companionship, and the world began to see them not as foes, but as potential friends. One of the most dramatic shifts in the dragon's role comes from the towering menace of Smaug in The Hobbit. Smaug, with his golden horde and greed-fueled rage, is everything a dragon should be: fearsome, unstoppable, and devastating. He symbolizes the very dangers that once defined these creatures in mythology. His fire was hot enough to burn entire cities, and his mind was as sharp as his claws. To encounter Smaug was to confront a powerful force, one that could not be tamed. For Bilbo and the dwarves, the dragon wasn't just a threat, it was an insurmountable barrier between them and their dream. But contrast that with Toothless, the dragon from How to Train Your Dragon, and the transformation is striking. Toothless, unlike Smaug, isn't a creature driven by greed or destruction. He is, in his way, vulnerable. When Hiccup first meets him, Toothless is a wild thing, frightened, misunderstood, and alone. His sharp teeth and fiery breath are still present, but there's something else, a longing for connection. Hiccup sees that, despite the fearsome appearance, Toothless is more than just a dragon. He's a creature capable of loyalty, love, and deep emotion. The shift from villain to companion isn't just a matter of changing the dragon's role in the plot. It speaks to something deeper about the way we view relationships, trust, and the potential for change. At first, Hiccup has no reason to trust Toothless. The dragon is a threat, a thing to be feared and avoided. Yet, as their bond deepens, we see a dragon not as an obstacle to be defeated, but as a creature deserving of understanding. It's a shift that mirrors our own desires for connection in a world that often sees difference as something to be feared. The dragon's evolution from villain to ally can also be seen in Game of Thrones, where Daenerys Targaryen's dragons are more than mere weapons of war. Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion are the living embodiments of Daenerys' journey. They are not just creatures that fly and breathe fire, they are her children, her companions. Throughout the series, we witness their bond with Daenerys deepen as she learns to control them, to understand them, and to rely on them. In the same way that she grows into her role as a leader, her dragons evolve from symbols of destruction to symbols of hope and strength. Daenerys' relationship with her dragons reveals a different layer of connection, one built on mutual respect and shared experience. The dragons are more than mere beasts of burden or instruments of terror. They become symbols of Daenerys' strength and her vulnerability. Their loyalty to her is not born out of fear, but out of trust, an unspoken bond between a woman and the creatures she raised, and a reminder that even the fiercest of beasts can be softened by love. The dragons that once stood as antagonists, guarding treasures and kingdoms, are now part of a larger narrative of growth, understanding, and mutual support. And this shift isn't limited to modern works of fiction. Across centuries, the dragon has symbolized not just chaos, but change, both the terrifying and the transformative. The dragon of Milan, Mushu, might seem like a far cry from Smaug or Drogon, but he, too, is a companion in a way that shifts our view of dragons. Mushu is small, even comical, in comparison to the great beasts of other legends, but he brings something crucial to Milan's journey: guidance, encouragement, and a reminder that courage doesn't always have to come from grand gestures. Sometimes, it's the smallest of companions that make the biggest difference. Mushu's loyalty and support show that even dragons, no matter their size or temperament, can offer something far more meaningful than power or terror, a friendship that carries you through the hardest of times. In a way, these shifting portrayals of dragons reflect the ways we, as a society, view fear, power, and companionship. The dragon no longer stands as a distant, terrifying force of nature. Instead, it has become a companion, a creature who can offer wisdom, protection, and even love. They are no longer mere obstacles to be overcome, but beings with whom we can connect. As the dragon transitions from villain to ally in storytelling, it also challenges us to rethink how we view others who are different from us. What once was feared, misunderstood, or seen as a threat can, with understanding and empathy, become a source of strength and friendship. Hiccup's bond with Toothless, Daenerys' trust in Drogon, and even Mushu's playful loyalty to Mulan show us that even the most fearsome creatures, whether dragons or otherwise, are capable of change, and so are we. The change in the way we see dragons is a change in how we see ourselves. It's about moving beyond the surface to understand the deeper connections that bind us together. And, in a world filled with misunderstandings and fear, perhaps that's the most powerful magic of all, the ability to see the dragon, not as a monster to be slain, but as a companion to be cherished. There's a moment in every gamer's life, whether it's gathered around a table with friends or holding a controller late at night, when the dragon appears. At first, you only hear the rumble of wings, a shadow passing overhead. Then, you feel the heat. The air shivers as the fire burns bright against your screen or the walls of your imagination. You grip your dice tighter, your palms sweating. You know what's coming. The dragon is here. In the world of gaming, dragons aren't just mythical creatures, they are forces of nature. They are challenges, triumphs, and symbols of power. In Dungeons & Dragons, one of the most iconic tabletop role-playing games, the dragon represents the ultimate test of skill, wit, and bravery. The mere mention of a dragon sends shivers down the spine of any adventurer. Whether it's the red dragon, with its fiery breath, or the ancient, wise, and terrifying gold dragon, players know that dragons bring danger, but also endless reward. For many, dragons are the pinnacle of the RPG experience. When your party stumbles across that hidden cave, the air thick with the scent of treasure, and you see the gleam of hoarded gold just beyond the shadows, your heart races. You know something incredible is coming, even if you don't know how it will unfold. The dice will roll, fate will be decided, and a battle will either be won or lost against a creature that represents everything you've been fighting for and everything you could lose. But the excitement isn't just about the fight itself. Dragons in games are much more than foes to defeat. They are part of the world you inhabit, embodying the richness and depth of the universe you're exploring. The dragon isn't just a monster, it's a story. It's the whisper of a long-lost age, a creature born of fire and magic, bound to the land in ways that no mere mortal could ever understand. Each dragon tells its own tale, and within that tale lies a challenge that players must not only survive, but learn from. Dragons are puzzles wrapped in flame, mysteries hidden behind scales, and every encounter with them becomes a lesson, a moment that shapes the way you see the world and yourself. In Skyrim, the appearance of a dragon changes everything. The moment you hear that deep, guttural roar echoing through the mountains, you know the world has just shifted. Dragons are no longer just legendary creatures. They are real, and they are everywhere. As the Dragonborn, you are tasked with not just defeating these creatures, but understanding them, mastering their power, and becoming one with the ancient forces they embody. The thrill of hunting these massive, flying beasts is rivaled only by the weight of the responsibility that falls on your shoulders. The dragon's death means more than just the end of a fight. It means that you've stepped into a greater world, one filled with magic, ancient mysteries, and, yes, a few more dragons waiting to test you. There's something profound about facing a dragon in a game. It isn't simply about winning or losing. It's about the experience of taking on a being of such immense power. It's the fire that burns you, the scales that are almost impossible to pierce, the sense of awe as you look up at the impossible size of the creature standing before you. When you defeat a dragon, it isn't just a victory. It's an achievement that feels like it could be your own story, a mark of your place in a world where dragons are more than just monsters, they are legends. In Dungeons & Dragons, the allure of dragons is not just in their strength, but in the way they shape the world. They are a powerful catalyst for storytelling. A dragon may be the villain in one campaign, threatening the kingdom, but in another, it might be an ancient ally, guarding knowledge or offering wisdom to those brave enough to seek it. It's this complexity that makes dragons so much more than mere monsters. They are pivotal pieces of a world story, and the way players interact with them, whether through battle or diplomacy, alters the course of the game. But not all dragons in gaming are enemies to be slain. Some are companions, guides, or reluctant allies. The bond between player and dragon becomes more than just about the quest, it's about connection. In Dragon Age, dragons are revered creatures of incredible power, and encountering them is a significant event, one that can alter the fate of the world. They are not just obstacles to overcome, they are beings of deep importance, whose very presence shapes the narrative. The moment when your character approaches the dragon not with sword raised, but with a hand outstretched in peace, this is where the game transcends traditional boundaries. The dragon is no longer just a boss fight, it's a living, breathing force that can be reasoned with, respected, and even befriended. This shift is profound, and it echoes the broader evolution of dragons in storytelling. Where once dragons were universally feared and defeated, they now take on roles that encourage understanding, growth, and transformation. In games, the dragon is often a mirror, a reflection of what the player is capable of, both in terms of combat and in terms of the moral choices they make. Whether you're saving a dragon, negotiating with one, or learning its ancient secrets, the bond between player and creature becomes an essential part of the game's deeper meaning. There's something deeply emotional about these moments, when you've fought hard, when you've bled, when you've made it through the hardest challenges, and you stand before a dragon not as an enemy but as a partner. The dragon's eyes gleam with wisdom, its wings stretch wide, and for a moment, there's no fear, no conflict, just the understanding that, together, you can achieve something greater than you ever imagined. This is the heart of dragons in gaming culture. They are not just beasts to be slain. They are tests, guides, and sometimes, the greatest allies you'll ever have. In that fleeting moment, as the dragon's breath cools and the smoke clears, you realize something that is, perhaps, the greatest gift a game can give you. It's not the treasure, not the power, but the feeling that you have encountered something extraordinary. Something that, for all its fire and destruction, is capable of teaching you more about yourself than you could ever imagine. The screen flickers to life, a cascade of pixels lighting up in a burst of colors. The figure appears, massive, wings stretching wide, scales gleaming with iridescent light. It's a dragon, not just any dragon, but one that seems to pulse with the same fierce power that has captured the imaginations of humanity for centuries. Yet, this dragon isn't a creature of ancient myth. It's a creation of the digital age, born from the hands of artists across the world, spread in an instant across social media feeds, fan pages, and digital canvases. The dragon has found a new home, one that transcends time, space, and even the physical world. In the age of the internet, dragons are more alive than ever before. They no longer just exist in books or movies. They are everywhere, on fan art websites, in role-playing games, in digital comics, and on YouTube channels where aspiring artists or storytellers breathe life into these ancient beings. What is it about dragons that makes them so perfect for the digital world? It's as if they were made for this new age. There's a certain magic in the way dragons have evolved in the hands of online creators. In the world of digital art, every stroke of the mouse, every click of the tablet, brings them to life in ways that were once impossible. A dragon can be painted in fiery reds and oranges, its eyes glowing with an inner fire, or it can be rendered in shades of blue and silver, shimmering like ice. Some dragons are sleek and serpentine, others bulky and fierce. The imagination is limitless, and with the power of digital tools, artists can manifest dragons that push the boundaries of myth itself. The internet has become a canvas for countless interpretations of these creatures, transforming them from simple icons of fantasy into symbols of community, personal expression, and even rebellion. A dragon doesn't just represent power anymore, it represents identity. Online fandoms have adopted dragons as mascots, as symbols of strength, defiance, and freedom. It's not just about admiring the creature anymore, it's about owning it. Digital fans gather in forums and chat rooms, discussing, sharing, and creating content that celebrates dragons in all their forms. The dragon is no longer a solitary entity, it's a part of a larger, interconnected world of shared love and creativity. But it's not only art that breathes life into these dragons. The stories, too, are reborn. Through online communities, dragons are brought into new narratives, ones that blend old legends with new perspectives. A dragon might no longer simply be a destructive force to be overcome by a knight. In fan fiction, the dragon can be a mentor, a protector, or even a misunderstood creature struggling for acceptance. These new stories reflect something deeper, an exploration of identity, of transformation, of the ways in which we all grow and change, just like these dragons. Through the lens of fandom, dragons become symbols not just of power, but of vulnerability, of struggle, of finding one's place in the world. Some dragons, however, remain the fierce beasts of old. In the realm of gaming, the dragon is still often the final boss, the creature that stands between the player and the ultimate prize. The internet has brought together millions of gamers, and with them, dragons have become some of the most iconic figures in the gaming world. In games like World of Warcraft, Skyrim, and Dark Souls, dragons aren't just a challenge, they're the embodiment of the game's difficulty, the culmination of the player's journey. You can feel the heat as the dragon exhales a burst of fire in your direction, or hear the deep rumble of its wings as it soars above you, a massive presence that threatens to crush you with a single swipe of its claw. But there's a connection to these dragons that goes beyond their role as enemies. They represent a challenge within every game, the ultimate test of skill, patience, and strategy. For players, defeating a dragon is about more than just the victory, it's a mark of growth, of overcoming something that once seemed insurmountable. And when you step back from the screen after slaying that final dragon, the feeling lingers. You've earned your place in the world, alongside those who have faced dragons before you, from the heroes of old myths to the ones in your own personal story. Even in the world of memes and social media, dragons find their place. They may appear in whimsical gifs, silly drawings, or humorous video clips. The dragon's majesty is juxtaposed with moments of lightheartedness. It's a symbol that people can turn to for inspiration, humor, and connection. In these small, fleeting moments, dragons seem to be everywhere and nowhere, offering both power and a sense of fun in the chaos of the internet. They're no longer confined to high fantasy, ancient texts, or distant lands. They're here, now, part of everyday digital culture. And then, there are the dragon lovers. These passionate fans have turned dragons into a cultural phenomenon that extends far beyond the digital canvas. Social media platforms are filled with hashtags dedicated to dragons, #DragonArt, #DragonLove, #DragonFandom. each one a gateway to a community where dragons are more than just creatures of lore. They are companions, mentors, and reflections of the self. People post their dragon tattoos, their dragon-themed collections, their favorite dragon quotes from movies and books. It's a shared love that unites people across the globe. From artists to writers, gamers to casual fans, dragons are symbols of unity and creativity, transcending language barriers, borders, and even time. In this new digital world, dragons have found a place where they can exist, evolve, and thrive, no longer bound by the limitations of traditional storytelling or ancient texts. The power of the internet has ensured that dragons are no longer just relics of the past. They are living, breathing entities, continuously reimagined and reshaped by the people who love them. Whether they are majestic beasts that stir awe or fiery monsters that challenge the bravest adventurers, dragons continue to inspire, captivate, and connect us in ways that are as boundless as the skies they soar through. In the digital age, dragons are more than just mythical creatures. They are a bridge between generations, cultures, and dreams. They are a reflection of our own strength, struggles, and desires, and through them, we find a piece of ourselves. Even as the world changes, the dragon remains a constant, a symbol of something eternal that will always be with us, no matter where we go. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, misty mountain range, the jagged peaks looming like ancient guardians of a forgotten world. The air is thick with the scent of pine and smoke. In the distance, a shadow stirs, large and powerful. The ground trembles as something enormous unfurls its wings and takes flight, blotting out the sun with the sheer scale of its presence. It's not a bird. It's not a plane. It's a dragon. For a fleeting moment, you wonder, could such a beast have ever existed? The idea that dragons, those majestic, terrifying creatures, could have roamed the earth alongside humans is a thought that fills the heart with a sense of wonder, yet also fear. What if the legends of dragons weren't just stories told by firelight, but accounts of creatures that lived, breathed, and soared through the skies, carving out their place in the history of our planet? What would a dragon look like in the flesh? How could such an enormous, powerful creature survive in an ecosystem that, even today, seems too fragile for the largest animals? Could the very laws of nature bend to accommodate such a creature, or would it have to defy every rule we've come to understand about biology? Consider the wings. Even the largest birds of today, like the albatross, can barely sustain flight due to the limitations of their bone structure and muscle mass. A dragon, however, would need to be lighter than air itself, its bones hollow, like those of birds, but much stronger. Their muscles would have to be so powerful, so finely tuned, that they could launch and sustain flight. Imagine the force of those wings flapping through the air, their shadow sweeping across the earth as they glided over forests and rivers, watching everything below like kings of a forgotten age. But how would such creatures eat? The legends speak of dragons hoarding treasure, but perhaps the true treasure for a dragon would be the vast landscapes that provide enough food for its colossal appetite. A dragon would need to consume massive amounts of meat, scavenging large swaths of the land for herds of creatures. Think of the vast herds of prehistoric beasts that once roamed the earth. Could dragons have hunted them, their fire-breathing power making them unstoppable predators? Or perhaps, like the great whales of the oceans, they fed on smaller creatures, the natural balance between predator and prey tipping in favor of a creature too large to challenge. And then, there's fire. Could the heat that dragons are so often depicted with ever have been real? There's something terrifying, yet fascinating, about the idea of a creature capable of spewing fire. Could the very biology of a dragon support such a thing? Maybe, just maybe, the dragon had a biological mechanism that produced fire-like heat. Perhaps it was a chemical reaction deep within its throat, a mix of substances that combusted when the dragon exhaled forcefully. Or maybe, like the bombardier beetle, dragons had a way of creating explosive bursts of heat, a defense mechanism, or perhaps an offensive one. What if fire wasn't the dragon's only weapon? Its claws, razor-sharp, would have to be capable of tearing through thick hides, crushing bones with a single swipe. Its teeth, like daggers, capable of shredding through flesh in an instant. But for all of its deadly features, there would be something beautiful about the creature. Its scales, shimmering in the sunlight, catching the light in ways that would dazzle even the most hardened heart. How many cultures have described these scales as being like gemstones or metals, glowing and gleaming as though the dragon were not just a beast, but something otherworldly, beyond the laws of nature? Now, imagine the environment in which this dragon would thrive. The habitat of such a creature would be extraordinary. It couldn't survive just anywhere. Vast mountain ranges, towering forests, and remote islands would be its domain. The ecosystems that would support dragons would need to be so rich in life that the dragon could survive, not just through raw strength, but through the support of the natural world around it. Perhaps the ecosystem would be more closely balanced than we imagine, with the dragon playing a crucial role in controlling other populations, maintaining the health of the forests, or keeping other species in check. The dragon would not be a mindless monster, but a part of an intricate, delicate web of life that we could never fully understand. If dragons did exist, they would have had to evolve in such a way that their presence on Earth was not just possible, but vital. Every aspect of their biology would have to be perfectly designed for survival. Every muscle, every scale, every breath of fire would need to work in harmony with their environment. It's a humbling thought that something so immense and awe-inspiring could have existed, blending seamlessly into the world of natural wonders and living alongside the creatures of the earth. And yet, as quickly as they might have appeared, they could have vanished, leaving behind only the traces of their existence in the myths and stories of the people who came after. But what if they never did vanish? What if, against all odds, dragons still exist in some hidden corner of the world, their wings unseen, their roars unheard? We've only begun to scratch the surface of the mysteries that lie in the deep jungles, the uncharted mountains, the unexplored oceans. Who's to say that in a world so vast, so full of secrets, the dragon hasn't found a place to hide, waiting for the time when it can soar once again, breathing fire into the sky, ruling the world with its wings? Could dragons have existed? Maybe not in the way we've imagined, but in the way our ancestors saw them, as creatures of legend, born from the fragments of fossils, the wonders of nature, and the fires of human imagination. The question lingers, unanswered, hanging in the air like the smoke from a dragon's breath, leaving us to wonder, in a world so vast, so full of mysteries, can we ever truly rule out the possibility of such beings? The air is thick with tension. In the midst of a violent storm, a shadow passes overhead. The ground shakes with each powerful beat of wings. A massive, mythical creature, the dragon, soars through the night, its body rippling with muscle and power. Beneath it, a world of ancient mountains and forests, untamed and wild. But as it ascends higher into the clouds, a question lingers in the mind, like an echo that refuses to fade. How could something so enormous, so powerful, ever take flight? And the breath it exhales, how could fire burn from its very mouth, a torrent of heat and destruction? The stuff of myths, surely. Or is it? The idea of a dragon, soaring effortlessly through the sky, its wings cutting through the air with the grace of an ancient predator, ignites a sense of awe. Yet, at the same time, it fills us with doubt. Can creatures like this truly exist, defying the laws of physics and biology that govern the world we know? If such a beast were to be more than mere legend, how could flight and fire be possible? Could there really be a scientific explanation for something so impossibly magnificent? We think of birds, of their delicate, fragile wings that flap in rhythm with the wind. The largest birds, like the albatross, can soar great distances, but even they have limitations. A dragon, though, would have wings much larger, capable of carrying the weight of its colossal frame. The question is, how could such wings, large and heavy enough to support something so massive, actually achieve flight? Would the dragon's body have to be weightless, its bones hollow and fragile, yet stronger than any bone we've ever seen? Perhaps its wings would have to be far more than just a means of lift. They would need to generate immense power, enough to carry the dragon aloft and keep it soaring through the air. Could it be that the dragon's wings were powered by some unseen, miraculous force? Its muscles, perhaps, would need to be stronger than anything known in the animal kingdom. Imagine the speed and power those wings would have to produce, flapping with the force of a hurricane, keeping the dragon aloft in a dance between the earth and the sky. But flight alone is not enough. For the dragon to be truly awe-inspiring, it must possess something else, something that takes it beyond the realm of natural animals. Something that will strike fear into the hearts of those who witness it. Fire. The very idea of a living creature capable of exhaling fire, a torrid, scorching wave of heat, feels almost laughable in the face of science. How could such a thing even be possible? What would it take for a creature to generate enough heat to produce fire from its mouth? The answer is a tangled web of biology and chemistry, one that seems as impossible as the dragon itself. To breathe fire, the dragon would need some sort of chemical reaction, deep within its body, capable of producing the intense heat necessary to ignite the air. Imagine, if you will, two different chemicals stored in separate glands within the dragon's body, perhaps a volatile combination of phosphorus and methane. The dragon could inhale deeply, filling its lungs with air, and as it exhaled, the chemicals would mix and ignite, a burst of fire surging forth, as hot as the flames from the sun. A natural flamethrower, one that could scorch the earth with ease. But there's another possibility, something far stranger. Could the dragon possess some sort of biological furnace within its body, a chamber where its internal systems generate heat so intense that it could combust anything in its path? Perhaps its heart beats with the power of a furnace, pumping blood heated by an internal, fiery source. The dragon would exhale not just air, but an inferno, a blast of fire that could burn through forests, scorch villages, and make the very ground tremble. But even if fire could somehow be created, what of the mechanics of it all? The dragon would need to control its fire with perfect precision. Fire cannot be unleashed at random, it must be controlled, aimed, and delivered with intent. Its mouth would have to be more than just a means of eating or speaking, it would be a weapon, designed for one purpose, to unleash destruction with every exhale. Would the dragon's teeth be capable of channeling the fire, focusing it like a flamethrower? Could its tongue serve as a trigger, releasing a carefully crafted, controlled burst of flame? The idea of fire-breathing dragons might seem like something straight out of a fairy tale, but the possibilities are endless. The fire, the flight, these aren't just elements of a story. They are symbols of something far deeper, something that touches at the very heart of what it means to push the limits of reality. To ask ourselves, what if the impossible could be made real? What if the dragon, in all its glory, had once soared across the sky, burning everything in its wake with its fiery breath? There is beauty in the absurdity of it all. There is something that stirs within the soul when we think of such a creature, something that challenges the very fabric of our understanding. How could a dragon fly? How could it breathe fire? The answer may forever elude us, a mystery that will remain locked in the annals of legend. Yet, the thought remains, what if the world was once home to creatures that defied the very rules we live by? What if, in some forgotten corner of the earth, there are still stories waiting to be told about dragons, beasts that conquered the sky and the land with the sheer force of their will and power? As the dragon fades into the mist, disappearing into the clouds, we are left to wonder, could flight and fire really have been a part of our world? Could such impossible feats, once only whispered about in legends, have been more than just stories? Could there be a truth hidden somewhere, in the cracks of the earth, waiting for someone brave enough to ask the question, could dragons have truly existed, defying all that we know? In the ancient legends, dragons were more than just creatures of fire and flight. They were beings of profound intelligence, with minds as vast and complex as the worlds they ruled. It's easy to think of them as mere beasts, but that view does little justice to the deeper, more mysterious aspects of their nature. These dragons were not just feared for their power, but revered for their wisdom, cunning, and sometimes even their quiet melancholy. When a dragon spoke, it was not just a creature roaring for dominance, but a voice from the edges of eternity, whispering secrets that only the wise would dare to understand. Imagine standing before one of these dragons. Its scales glisten in the moonlight, each one like a fragment of forgotten stars. The ground beneath you vibrates with its presence. It stares at you with ancient eyes, eyes that have seen the rise and fall of empires, the birth of mountains, and the death of seas. You hesitate, your heart racing, unsure if the creature is a god or a demon or something else entirely. The silence stretches between you like a canyon, and then, in a voice that seems to echo through time itself, the dragon speaks. It is not a roar, but a measured, deliberate voice. Why do you seek me, human? It is a question that does not need to be asked, for the answer is already known: power, knowledge, survival. But the dragon is not interested in simple answers. It wants to know why you, of all people, have come to its lair. Why are you not content with your small world, your fleeting life, your mortal limitations? What could possibly drive you to seek the wisdom of a creature so old, so vast, that it could crush you with the flick of its tail? This intelligence, this sentience, is what sets dragons apart in myth. They are not mere beasts. They are minds, capable of understanding the depths of existence in a way that humans can barely grasp. The stories are filled with dragons who speak in riddles, who offer bargains that twist fate, who know the secrets of the universe and the hearts of men. Their motives are as mysterious as the stars themselves, their actions often driven by knowledge rather than raw anger or hunger. When a dragon appears, it does not just seek to terrorize, it seeks to teach, to challenge, to awaken something within those who are brave enough to face it. In some cultures, dragons were guardians of knowledge, protectors of ancient secrets that could alter the course of history. In China, the dragon was a symbol of wisdom and strength, an intelligent creature that could bring rain, control the elements, and grant prosperity. These dragons were not mindless monsters, but rather figures of respect, guiding rulers with their deep understanding of nature and the world. The belief that dragons could help humans achieve greatness speaks to the deep connection between dragons and the human desire for understanding. Other stories tell of dragons with a more complex relationship with the world. In the Norse myths, the dragon Fafnir hoarded a treasure, but his obsession with it grew to consume him, turning him into a beast of greed and destruction. He wasn't just a creature driven by animalistic desires, he was a creature whose mind had been twisted by his own intelligence, his cunning. The more he understood the power of gold and treasure, the more he allowed it to consume him, until all that was left was a dragon bound to a hoard, its mind lost in its own greed. Even in the darkest tales, dragons hold a deep, tragic intelligence. In some versions of the story of St. George, the dragon is not just a villain, but a victim of its own nature. It is a creature bound by a curse, driven to wreak havoc upon the land, but with an understanding of its own fate that makes it almost pitiable. The dragon is not just a mindless monster, but a tragic figure caught in the web of its own existence, unable to escape the role it has been cast in. Then there is the quiet wisdom of the dragon in The Hobbit. Smaug is not merely a beast guarding treasure, he is a master manipulator, a creature so clever and self-assured that he believes no one could possibly outsmart him. But his intelligence is his downfall, for it blinds him to the true danger, the humble hobbit who walks into his lair with nothing but a quiet courage and a sharp mind. Smaug's pride in his own intellect makes him blind to the possibility that a creature of lesser stature could defeat him, and in the end, it is his own arrogance that leads to his demise. These dragons are not simply mindless beasts of flame and fury. They are beings of thought, of intellect, of understanding. They can reason, bargain, and even manipulate, drawing on their ancient wisdom to shape the world around them. They are not just part of the natural world, they are integral to the very fabric of the universe itself, beings whose existence speaks to the limitless potential of intelligence, the consequences of unchecked power, and the complexity of life. Even in modern stories, the dragon's intelligence remains one of its most compelling traits. Take How to Train Your Dragon, for instance. Toothless, the Night Fury, is not just a creature of wild instinct. He is a dragon with emotions, with a mind of his own. He communicates with the protagonist, Hiccup, in ways that transcend words. Their relationship is one built on mutual understanding, respect, and shared knowledge. Toothless is not just a beast to be tamed, but a sentient being whose thoughts and feelings are as rich and complex as any human's. The intelligence of the dragon has a timeless allure. It challenges our perceptions of what it means to be alive, to be conscious. These dragons are more than just powerful creatures, they are symbols of the unknown, of wisdom, of the untapped potential of the mind. They are the reminder that intelligence is not always a gift to be cherished, but can also be a burden. The wise dragon knows the weight of its knowledge and the limitations that come with understanding the very nature of the world. It is a tragic beauty, a reminder that even the mightiest creatures are bound by their own minds. So the next time you hear the roar of a dragon or catch sight of its wings soaring across the sky, remember, this is no mindless beast. This is a creature with a heart full of thoughts, a mind brimming with ancient wisdom. In the stories, dragons are more than just fire and fury. They are the guardians of secrets, the keepers of knowledge, and the reminder that intelligence, when tempered with wisdom, is the true power in the world. In the dim light of the ancient castle, the villagers huddle together, their faces pale with fear. Outside, the ground trembles with the heavy steps of a beast. The air is thick with the scent of smoke and charred earth. The dragon has arrived. Its wings cast dark shadows over the land, its eyes glowing with the fire of destruction. With a roar that shakes the heavens, it sends a cascade of flames crashing toward the village. The homes that once stood tall and proud now lie smoldering ruins, and the villagers can only watch, powerless, as everything they've known and loved is reduced to ash. But then, just as quickly, a different kind of silence falls. The dragon's head shifts, its eyes narrowing as it spots something in the distance. A figure steps forward, an unlikely hero, someone who carries no weapon, but whose resolve burns brighter than any flame. The dragon pauses, and in that moment, the villagers hold their breath. This is not just a creature of destruction. There is more to it, something hidden beneath the scales and fire. The dragon watches, calculating, and with a low growl, it turns away from the village, its mighty wings stirring the air as it soars into the horizon, protecting what was meant to be destroyed. The duality of dragons has existed for as long as the stories themselves. They are not simply creatures of one nature, but of two, saviors and threats, guardians and monsters. The dragon is as much a force of protection as it is a force of terror. It is a contradiction, both feared and revered, a creature whose very presence can bring about the end of worlds or the birth of new hopes. Consider the stories of ancient civilizations where dragons were symbols of power. In some cultures, they were protectors, guardians of sacred places, guarding treasures, or serving as the stewards of nature. The Chinese dragon, for example, is a symbol of strength, protection, and good fortune. It was not the kind of dragon that would burn down cities or terrorize the innocent. Instead, it was a dragon that controlled the winds and the rains, that brought prosperity and harmony to the people. It was a protector of the natural world, keeping balance between the forces of nature and man. The dragon's role here is clear. It is a figure of divine protection, a creature to be worshipped, revered, and admired. But this same dragon, this force of nature, can also be a destroyer, an embodiment of the untamable wildness of the earth. In the European myths, the dragon is often a fearsome beast that hoards treasure in its dark lair, guarding it with ferocity and rage. These dragons are threats, creatures of destruction that bring chaos wherever they go. They are the monsters that heroes must face, the challenges that demand strength and courage. The stories are full of knights and warriors who venture into the depths of caves, fighting the fire-breathing beasts in order to save princesses, kingdoms, and nations. The dragon is the ultimate antagonist, a force of annihilation that must be vanquished for peace to be restored. But in both cases, the dragon's role is significant. It is never an ordinary creature. Whether it is a protector or a destroyer, the dragon represents the unknown, the primal forces of nature that cannot be controlled. Its power can either be harnessed for good or unleashed in uncontrollable fury. And perhaps that is what makes the dragon so captivating, the recognition that it holds the power to shape worlds, to bring life or death with equal measure. In many stories, the dragon's dual nature is embodied by the same creature. The dragon is not just a mindless beast, but a being with purpose, with its own desires and emotions. It is not evil for evil's sake, nor is it purely benevolent. It is a creature caught in a struggle, torn between its own nature and the role it is cast to play in the stories of men. Think of the dragon Smaug in The Hobbit. To the people of Erebor, Smaug is nothing less than a destroyer. He invades the kingdom, hoarding gold and treasures, casting his dark shadow over the land. Yet, there is another side to Smaug. He is not merely a villain, but a creature driven by his own pride, a protector of his horde. His destruction comes not out of malice, but from a deep-seated belief in the value of what he guards. To him, the treasure is his, and no one, no man or dwarf, can take it from him without facing the wrath of his fire. He is both the protector of his horde and the destroyer of those who threaten it. Then, there is the dragon in the never-ending story, where the creature is not just a beast, but a wise and understanding guide to the protagonist. It is a creature of gentleness and strength, teaching the hero to believe in himself. This dragon's purpose is not to bring ruin, but to show the way forward, to help the hero realize his potential and make his own choices. Perhaps the most powerful example of the dragon as protector is found in the beloved How to Train Your Dragon series. Toothless, the Night Fury, starts out as a terrifying, dangerous creature, one that threatens the peace of the island. But as the story unfolds, we learn that Toothless is not the monster he initially seems to be. Instead, he becomes an ally, a protector, and a friend. The true heart of the story is about understanding the dragon, seeing it not as a mindless beast, but as a sentient, intelligent being capable of love and loyalty. Toothless is a dragon who defends, who sacrifices, and who stands by his companion in times of greatest need. He is a protector, just as much as he is a creature of raw power. This shift in the portrayal of dragons, from mindless destroyers to compassionate protectors, reflects a broader change in how we view power itself. Dragons, in their duality, reflect the complexities of our own world. Power, whether in the form of a dragon or a human, can be used to create or to destroy. The key lies in how it is wielded. A dragon's fire, its claws, its wings, are not inherently evil or good, they are tools. What matters is the purpose behind them, the intent of the creature or person who holds that power. And yet, despite the many stories of dragons as protectors, there will always be the reminder of their darker side. For every toothless companion, there is a Smaug lying in wait, guarding a treasure that could change the world, or in some cases, ruin it. The dragon's dual nature, its ability to both protect and destroy, is what makes it such a timeless symbol. It is a reflection of the power that resides within all of us, a reminder that even the most noble of creatures can be twisted by greed, fear, or circumstance. It is the reminder that protection and destruction are two sides of the same coin, and that balance can shift with the slightest change of heart. The cold, damp air clings to your skin as you stand before the dark cave. Somewhere deep inside, you can feel it, the presence, the weight of something waiting. The shadows move as if alive, whispering in an ancient tongue, pulling you closer. You know what lies ahead, the dragon. It is a beast of unimaginable power, its eyes glowing with a fierce intelligence, its breath a wall of fire that could scorch the earth. And yet, you must face it. Because it is not just the dragon you face, it is what the dragon represents. Every step toward the cave feels heavier than the last. It's not just fear of the dragon, but fear of yourself. It's the fear of what you have hidden within. That dragon is no mere creature of legend, it is your own inner demon, the part of you that has been lying dormant, waiting for you to face it. The dragon's roar echoes through the cave, and in that sound, you hear the voices of your own doubts, your guilt, your anger, your darkest fears. The dragon is not just outside, it is within. And in that moment, you realize the battle ahead is not one of blood and fire, but of understanding and transformation. Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell both understood this. They knew that dragons, in their many forms, are not just physical creatures, they are symbols of the conflicts within us. For Jung, the dragon was the embodiment of the unconscious mind, those shadowy corners of our psyche where our deepest desires, fears, and unresolved conflicts dwell. The dragon is a force, not to be destroyed, but to be confronted and understood. It is in facing the dragon that we understand the parts of ourselves that we hide, the parts we are too afraid to look at. To face the dragon is to face the very essence of our inner turmoil. Jung's ideas about the shadow are crucial here. The shadow is the unconscious part of ourselves, the aspects we deny or reject. It's the anger we don't express, the vulnerabilities we hide, the insecurities we keep buried. The dragon is the shadow personified. Its fire and fury represent the intense emotions and conflicts we try to keep hidden. It rages and burns because it has been ignored, because it has been pushed down for too long. The dragon's destruction is not just outward, it is inward, consuming us from the inside. Joseph Campbell, in his work on the hero's journey, saw dragons as the ultimate test. The hero, whether in myth or in real life, must confront the dragon to prove their worth, to face their deepest fears and insecurities. Campbell wrote that the hero must go through a transformation, shedding the old self to embrace a new one. And this transformation is painful. It is the process of breaking down the old identity, the identity that has been shaped by fear, doubt, and the weight of unaddressed inner conflict. The dragon stands in the way of this transformation, challenging the hero to let go of their past and face the unknown. To slay the dragon is to conquer the fears and shadows within, to step into the light of a new self. But, as with all myths, there is something deeply personal about the dragon. It is not just the external challenge we face, it is the internal one. Each of us carries our own dragon. It might look different from the one in a storybook, but it exists just the same. It is the voice in your head telling you that you're not enough. It is the anger that swells in your chest when you feel wronged, the guilt that keeps you awake at night. The dragon takes on many forms, but it always represents something inside of you that you have yet to conquer. What's more, the dragon doesn't always have to be defeated. Jung taught that it's not about destroying the dragon, it's about integrating it. The real challenge is not vanquishing the beast, but understanding it. What is it trying to tell you? What does its fury reveal about your own hidden fears and desires? In many myths, the dragon is not killed but tamed, controlled, and even befriended. It becomes a companion, a guide. The dragon's fire can be harnessed, its power channeled for a greater purpose. To live with the dragon is to learn from it, to grow with it. The fire that once threatened to consume now becomes a source of strength. This inner battle, the struggle between self-doubt and self-empowerment, is something we all know. At some point, we've all faced the dragon within. It could have been in moments of failure, when we questioned our own worth. It could have been in moments of grief, when the pain of loss felt too heavy to bear. It might even have been in those quiet moments when we look in the mirror and wonder if we'll ever be good enough. The dragon is always there, in the back of our minds, waiting for us to confront it. And so, as the hero steps into the cave, sword in hand, they must first recognize that the real enemy is not the dragon, but their own fear. The sword is only the tool, the courage, the strength to face the dragon, comes from within. It is the willingness to confront the darkness, the parts of ourselves we've kept hidden, and to learn that we are not our fears, our insecurities, or our mistakes. We are something more. The dragon, in all its fierceness, is part of us. And in facing it, we come to understand ourselves in a way we never could before. But the journey doesn't stop at slaying the dragon. That's only the beginning. Once we've faced our inner demons, we are left to rebuild. The fire has burned, and now it's time to rise from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. The dragon's fire may have been destructive, but it also purged what was no longer needed. What remains is the true self, unafraid to confront the world, unafraid to confront the dragons that will always be there, both inside and out. In the end, the dragon, both the mythic creature and the psychological force, is not our enemy. It is the mirror that reflects our own struggles, our deepest fears, and our greatest potential. It is not just a challenge, it is the opportunity for growth. The dragon shows us that, sometimes, the greatest battles we fight are the ones within. And in conquering those, we find a strength we never knew we had. There's a moment in every story, the one where the world shifts, where everything you've known is turned upside down. For many, this moment feels like standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into the vast unknown, your heart racing with a mix of terror and wonder. You feel the pressure, the weight of what's to come, and your feet tremble. The winds of change howl around you, and there, in the distance, something stirs. It's not just any creature, it's a dragon. Its wings spread wide, and its eyes lock onto yours. And then, without warning, the transformation begins. The dragon is not just a creature of flame and flight, it is the symbol of change itself. It is a being born from chaos, forged in fire, and destined to evolve into something greater. But transformation is never easy. It is never without danger. When the dragon appears, it does not come to merely disrupt, it comes to change everything. And in that moment, when the dragon's roar shakes the earth, you realize that this change might very well be your own. In every culture, dragons embody the raw power of transformation. They are the fire that burns away the old, making way for the new. The dragon stands as a challenge, a barrier, a force that demands you step beyond who you once were. It represents the potential for rebirth, but only through struggle. To face the dragon is to face your own limitations, your fears, and your doubts. But it's also the chance to transcend them, to grow stronger, to become something more than you ever imagined. The process is terrifying. There is nothing comfortable about it. As the dragon shifts, as it unfurls its wings, its very presence reminds you of the power it holds. It is the embodiment of growth, but growth that can scorch, break, and tear you apart. You cannot move forward without shedding the old skin. To grow, you must first face the dangers within. The dragon does not allow you to bypass the struggle, it demands you confront your own inner monsters. It pushes you to question who you are, what you believe, and what you're willing to sacrifice. But in that struggle, there is a truth. You will emerge from the fire, stronger, unrecognizable, but somehow more complete. Every fire is a test. The dragon is the flame that licks at the edges of your soul, forcing you to face what you've hidden in the dark corners of your heart. It knows your deepest fears, your darkest truths. It doesn't care for excuses or masks. When it comes, you cannot run. You can only stand and face it. It will scorch you. It will break you down, piece by piece. But from the ashes, something incredible happens. From the remnants of your past, something new begins to grow. You are no longer who you were. You are something different, something stronger, something reborn. That is the power of the dragon. It is not merely a force of destruction, but a necessary part of the cycle of life. In every myth, from ancient legends to modern tales, dragons come to signify the exact moment when something must change. They are not enemies to be defeated, but forces to be understood. They represent the dangerous, painful moments of life, the ones that make us question everything. But through these moments, we find transformation. We find the opportunity to be reborn into something better, stronger, more attuned to who we are meant to be. The dragon, in all its fierceness, is the guardian of this process. It protects the treasure, the wisdom, the strength that can only be attained through transformation. The treasure is not gold or jewels, but something far more precious, the knowledge that we have faced our deepest fears and survived. That we have been through the fire and come out on the other side, stronger and more complete. The dragon may have tried to destroy us, but in doing so, it only forged us into something greater. Even in this modern age, where technology dominates and myths are often forgotten, the dragon endures. It lives on in our stories, in our dreams, in the very fabric of our imagination. No matter how much the world changes, no matter how many times we replace our ancient stories with new ones, the dragon always returns. It doesn't matter that we have no need for such creatures in the real world, no matter how much we've come to understand about the forces of nature. The dragon, this incredible, terrifying, and beautiful being, will never fade away. Why? Because dragons are more than just creatures. They are symbols of something deeper, something that lies at the core of what it means to be human. They embody the wild parts of ourselves, the raw power, the untamed beauty that we so often suppress. The dragon, in its most pure and primal form, represents our deepest desires and our greatest fears. It is the creature that both terrifies and fascinates us, reminding us of our own vulnerability in a world that can feel as chaotic and untamable as the flames it breathes. When we look back at the stories that have shaped our understanding of dragons, we see that they were never meant to be just physical creatures. They were forces of nature, embodying the elements, the powers of earth, air, fire, and water. These creatures were as big as the world itself, bigger than life, bigger than death. And it's that enormity, that overwhelming presence, that continues to captivate us. No matter how much the world changes, we still crave the thrill of the unknown. We still need something that challenges us, something that shows us just how small we are in the grand scheme of things. And the dragon, the fire-breathing giant of legend, is the perfect representation of that power. The dragon never dies because we need it. We need to be reminded of the wildness that exists in the world, the wildness that lies in ourselves. We need to confront our fears, and we need to know that even in the face of something so immense and terrifying, we can still fight back, still rise up. In a way, the dragon represents a part of us that never goes away, a part of us that will always be looking for adventure, for something bigger than ourselves. That part of us is eternal, just like the dragon. And perhaps that's why dragons live on in our hearts. Even as the world becomes more ordered, more predictable, and more safe, we crave that unpredictability, that fire. We want to believe in something more, something that can still surprise us. We want to believe that there is magic in the world, that there are forces beyond our understanding, beyond our control. The dragon, with its power and mystery, embodies that desire. It's a reminder that there is still magic out there, magic we can't explain or control, but magic that we can still dream about. The dragon lives because it is both the protector and the destroyer. It's the force of nature that reminds us of our place in the world, but also a symbol of our potential to rise above it. In a world where so much is certain, so much is predictable, the dragon reminds us of what it means to be alive. It reminds us that we are not just passive observers of the world, but active participants in the unfolding story of the universe. We may be small, but we are capable of greatness. We may be fragile, but we have the power to stand against the fire. The stories of dragons have changed over the years, evolving with the times, adapting to new cultures, new technologies, and new understandings. In some tales, the dragon is a villain, an enemy to be slain. In others, it is a noble guardian, a wise and powerful ally. In all of them, however, the dragon represents something bigger than life itself, a force that cannot be tamed, cannot be fully understood, but one that we must face, one that will always be with us, as long as we are willing to embrace the mystery. In this modern world, dragons have taken on new forms. They appear in the books we read, the games we play, the movies we watch. They are no longer just ancient beasts of legend, they are reflections of our modern dreams, our modern fears, and our modern desires. Whether they are the terrifying creatures of Game of Thrones, the playful companions of How to Train Your Dragon, or the wise and ancient beings of fantasy novels, they still carry the same spark, the same eternal flame. No matter how much the world changes, no matter how many new stories are told, the dragon will always find a way to soar again, its wings unfurling in the sky. And maybe that's the true magic of the dragon. It's not just a creature of the past, it's a symbol of everything we still believe in. It's a reminder that we are not alone, that there is still wonder and mystery in the world. It's a symbol of strength, of courage, of transformation, and of fire, always burning, always ready to rise again. The dragon, in all its forms, will never die. It is as eternal as the spark within us all, as eternal as the desire to dream, to explore, to create. As long as we have stories to tell, the dragon will be there, watching from the shadows, waiting to take flight once more.